Welcome, traveller, breathe in, let the modern world fall away. Tonight, we journey backward through the mists of time, leaving behind the bright lights and the endless rush. You are safe here, wrapped in a blanket of quiet history, where the hours stretch long and unhurried. Close your eyes and listen to the steady, comforting rhythm of your own breath. With each exhale, you sink deeper into a profound and restful peace. The air around you begins to change, growing cooler, carrying the faint earthy scent of high mountain pine and ancient smouldering charcoal. We are travelling to the year 1710, high in the rugged snow-capped Himalayas. Here, nestled within a secluded valley, lies a sanctuary of sound and fire. It is twilight, the hour when the harshness of day softens into an indigo embrace. You stand before the heavy cedar doors of a Tibetan forge, where master artisans breathe life into bronze and copper. The world outside these walls is vast and cold, but inside there is only the warm, glowing hearth and the promise of perfect harmony. Let your shoulders drop, release the tension in your jaw. The journey ahead is a gentle one, meant only to soothe your weary mind and guide you toward the borders of deep, restorative sleep. Step across the threshold now as the gentle echoes of the past reach out to welcome you home. Your mind is quiet, your heart is steady, and the night is entirely yours. As you settle into this peaceful space, taking a moment to simply exist, consider allowing these historical journeys to become a regular haven for your soul. By choosing to subscribe to our channel, you are preserving your own quiet sanctuary, a place you can return to whenever the modern world grows too loud. Liking this video softly signals to us that you have found comfort within these ancient walls, helping to keep the fires of this sleepy forge burning for many evenings to come. And if you know another traveller seeking rest, delicately share this tale with them, so they too might find solace in the past. Your gentle support allows us to continue unearthing the most tranquil chapters of history, crafting these long, unbroken moments of serenity entirely for you. Now, let us drift deeper into the twilight of 1710. As the final embers of daylight fade outside, the copper lamps within the workshop begin to cast long, dancing shadows across the clay floor. Listen to the soft, rhythmic hum lingering in the warm air, a prelude to the magnificent creations born here. You are an honored guest in this timeless place, surrounded by the wisdom of generations and the meticulous care of patient artisans. Settle in completely, uncrossing your legs, resting your hands gently in your lap. The forge is ready to reveal its quiet mysteries to you. Let the soothing symphony of history wash over you, lulling you into the sweetest, deepest sleep imaginable. The path leading to the sanctuary of the forge is paved with flat, irregular stones, polished to a muted sheen by the passage of countless footsteps over centuries. These stones, harvested from the very ribs of the surrounding Himalayan peaks, hold the chill of the evening air within their dense, slate-grey cores. As you walk, the muffled crunch of loose gravel underfoot provides a steady, rhythmic cadence, a soft grounding sound that tethers you to the present moment. The altitude here is immense, yet the air is surprisingly rich, carrying the complex, resinous perfume of juniper shrubs that cling stubbornly to the rocky crevices. This scent is interwoven with the distant, earthy aroma of crushed moss and the crisp, undeniable purity of high-altitude snow. The sky above is a vast, uninterrupted expanse of deepening indigo, painted with the last fading brushstrokes of a sunset that bled from pale lavender into a deep, bruised violet before finally surrendering to the encroaching dusk. The light has not entirely vanished. It lingers as a luminous twilight, casting a delicate pearlescent glow over the snow-dusted ridges that cup the valley. This valley, a natural amphitheatre of stone and silence, acts as a cradle holding the forge in a protective embrace against the harsh, biting winds that scour the exposed peaks far above. The wind here is merely a whisper, a tender sigh that rustles the prayer flags strung along the eaves of the building. These flags, faded by the sun and frayed by the relentless elements, flutter with a slow, deliberate grace, sending silent, unseen blessings into the darkening expanse. Approaching the structure itself, you begin to appreciate the profound solidity of its construction. It is not merely a building, it is an extension of the mountain itself rising organically from the uneven ground. The walls are unbelievably thick, constructed from massive blocks of indigenous granite and limestone. Each stone was hewn by hand, bearing the subtle, undulating marks of iron chisels wielded by artisans long forgotten. The stones are irregular, yet they fit together with a precision that speaks of immense patience and an intimate understanding of the materials. Between these massive blocks, the mortar is a pale, sandy beige, composed of crushed river pebbles, local clay, and a binding sap harvested from the surrounding forests. This mixture, cured over decades, has hardened into a substance nearly as resilient as the stone it binds. In the fading twilight, the texture of these walls invites touch. If you were to press your palm against the stone, you would feel a complex topography. The sharp, microscopic ridges of quartz, the smooth, powdery indentations of limestone, and the delicate, velvety patches of silver-green lichen that have colonized the shaded alcoves. The lichen grows in intricate fractal patterns reminiscent of miniature alien forests, thriving in the cool, damp microclimates created by the building's overhangs. As the light continues to dim, the walls seem to absorb the shadows, their colors shifting from cool gray to a deep, enveloping charcoal, anchoring the structure firmly to the earth. Above the heavy stone walls, the roof slopes gracefully downward, a sweeping canopy designed to shed the heavy winter snows. It is tiled with thick, overlapping slabs of dark slate, each piece uniquely shaped and layered like the protective scales of a dormant, mythical creature. The slate reflects the last ambient light of the evening, catching the faint glint of early starlight on its smooth, wet surfaces, a testament to a recent passing mist. The eaves extend far beyond the walls, creating a deep, sheltering perimeter around the building. These overhangs are supported by massive, hand-carved brackets of Himalayan cedar. The wood, exposed to the elements for generations, has oxidized into a rich, complex shade of mahogany, streaked with veins of silver and ash grey. Carved into the face of each bracket are winding, geometric patterns, endless knots, and stylized lotus petals, symbols of eternity and purity that have grown smooth and rounded with time. The craftsmanship is not boastful, it is quiet and purposeful, intended not to dazzle the eye but to soothe the spirit. Nestled within the deepest shadows of the eaves, small paper-thin nests built by mountain swallows cling to the wood, abandoned for the season but leaving behind a delicate reminder of the life that shares this sanctuary. The subtle scent of the cedar, spicy and warm, mingles with the cold mountain air, creating a sensory threshold that marks the transition from the wild, untamed outdoors to the sheltered haven within. The entrance to the forge is guarded by a pair of monumental wooden doors, standing easily twice the height of a person. These doors are constructed from single vertical planks of centuries-old walnut, a wood chosen for its incredible density and resistance to the dampness of the mountain climate. The surface of the doors is a study in texture and time. It is not polished or varnished, rather, it has been smoothed by the natural oils of countless hands pushing them open over the decades. The grain of the walnut is deeply pronounced, swirling in dark, mesmerizing eddies and long, graceful lines that tell the story of the tree's slow, deliberate growth through harsh winters and brief, brilliant summers. Embedded within the wood are heavy iron studs, forged in this very room, their rounded heads darkened with a patina of deep brown and subtle iridescent purple. The hinges, too, are massive works of iron, stretching across the width of the doors in ornate, sprawling shapes resembling the stylized wings of a bird in flight. Despite their immense weight, the doors are perfectly balanced. When pushed, they yield with surprising grace, opening smoothly on a central pivot that produces only a low, resonant wooden sigh. This is a sound that vibrates through the soles of your feet rather than ringing in your ears. Stepping over the raised wooden threshold, which is worn down in the center into a shallow concave dip from centuries of foot traffic, you leave the cold night behind completely. You find yourself standing in an anteroom, a small transitional space designed to hold the mountain draft at bay before it can reach the main workshop. The atmosphere here is immediately different. The air is still dense and noticeably warmer, carrying the first tantalizing hints of the work performed deeper within the building. There is a profound silence in this small room, a heavy velvet quiet that seems to wrap itself around your shoulders like a comforting cloak. The floor beneath you changes from the irregular stone of the outside path to tightly packed rammed earth. This earthen floor has been swept and moistened so many times that it possesses a leathery, almost resilient quality, yielding ever so slightly to your weight. Along the walls of the anteroom, simple wooden pegs protrude from the stone, holding thick woven woolen cloaks and wide-brimmed felt hats, garments left behind by the artisans as they transitioned from their journey to their craft. The fabric of these cloaks is coarse, smelling faintly of sheep's wool, wood smoke, and the damp mist of the valley. A solitary, low-burning butter lamp rests on a recessed stone shelf, casting a meagre but steady pool of golden light. The flame is small, shaped like a perfect glowing teardrop, fed by a pool of clarified yak butter that emits a sweet and slightly savory fragrance. The light from this lamp does not conquer the darkness. Instead, it delicately pushes it back, creating a mesmerizing dance of long blurred shadows that sway in rhythm with the barely perceptible flicker of the flame. Within the golden halo cast by the butter lamp, you can observe the slow hypnotic waltz of dust motes suspended in the still air. These tiny particles drift with an elegant, weightless grace, catching the light and transforming into momentary floating sparks. You are perfectly grounded, perfectly safe, suspended in a pocket of time where nothing is required of you, and where every detail is a peaceful invitation to rest. Moving deeper into the sanctuary, you encounter a final barrier separating the anteroom from the main workshop, a magnificent heavy curtain suspended from a thick, hand-wrought iron rod. This is not a delicate fabric, but a massive expanse of woven yak hair, dyed a deep, earthy burgundy using the crushed roots of local mountain plants. The material is incredibly dense, hanging with a profound, immovable weight that speaks to its purpose of trapping the precious warmth within the forge. As you reach out to part the curtain, the coarse, wiry texture of the yak hair meets the sensitive skin of your fingertips. It is a tactile reminder of the rugged, high-altitude world that exists just beyond these walls. Yet here it has been tamed and woven into an instrument of profound comfort. The heavy fabric absorbs the ambient sound, creating an almost completely deadened acoustic space for the fraction of a second you spend passing through its folds. As you push it aside, the curtain yields slowly, offering a gentle, sweeping resistance before falling back into place behind you with a soft, muffled thud. This simple, deliberate action feels remarkably like passing through a veil, a physical crossing from the quiet anticipation of the outer world into the sacred, lingering warmth of the master's domain. You are now standing in the very heart of the Singing Bowl Forge, a tranquil space dedicated entirely to the alchemy of earth, fire, and sound. The moment the heavy curtain settles behind you, the atmosphere undergoes a profound and immediate transformation. The air in this vast, cavernous room is remarkably different from the cool stillness of the entryway. It is thick, rich, and layered with the invisible, comforting weight of lingering heat. This is not the sharp, aggressive burning of a fresh fire, but rather the deep, slow-baked warmth of a room that has absorbed the radiant energy of the forge for hundreds of uninterrupted years. The temperature wraps around you like a soft, invisible blanket, gently coaxing the last remnants of the mountain chill from your bones. As you take a slow, deep breath, your lungs fill with a complex, intoxicating aroma entirely unique to this space. It is a subtle perfume woven from the metallic tang of cooling copper, the earthy, grounded scent of fine clay dust, and the sweet, almost incense-like fragrance of burned hardwood charcoal. Beneath these prominent notes, there is a fainter, older smell, a scent of aged beeswax and natural resins used for polishing the finished bowls, creating an olfactory tapestry that tells the story of centuries of meticulous, unhurried creation. The ambient heat seems to emanate from everywhere at once, from the hard-packed earthen floor beneath your feet, from the massive stone walls that enclose you, and from the heavy wooden beams crisscrossing the ceiling high above. It is a nurturing environment, a place where time slows down to match the steady, deep breathing of the slumbering forge. Allowing your eyes to adjust to the gentle layered shadows, you begin to perceive the immense scale and purposeful architecture of the main workshop. The room is shaped like an elongated octagon, a deliberate design chosen specifically to channel the flow of air and sound in a continuous unbroken circle. The walls, much like the exterior, are constructed from monumental blocks of stone, but here on the inside they have been smoothed and coated with a thick layer of natural, sandy-coloured plaster. This plaster, infused with finely chopped straw and river silt, provides a subtly textured surface that catches and diffuses the limited twilight, preventing any harsh reflections that might strain the eye. High above, the ceiling is a breathtaking web of intersecting cedar beams. These colossal timbers, darkened to the shade of aged molasses by generations of wood smoke, span the width of the room without the need for central pillars. This architectural marvel creates an open, unencumbered space that allows the resonant frequencies of the singing bowls to bloom and decay naturally during the day's testing. The beams are joined using ancient, intricate mortise and tenon techniques, relying on gravity and precise geometry rather than iron nails to maintain their steadfast hold. Nestled among the highest rafters, deep pools of impenetrable shadow gather, giving the ceiling an illusion of infinite height. It is a space that feels both intimately sheltering and magnificently vast, a perfectly tuned instrument in its own right, designed to hold and nurture the delicate acoustics of the metalwork birthed within its walls. Dominating the exact center of this magnificent room is the great smelting hearth, the beating, fiery heart around which all life in the workshop softly revolves. The hearth is an elevated circular platform constructed from specially selected heat-resistant river stones, bound together by a thick, cracked layer of fired clay. The clay has been baked to a deep, ruddy terracotta color, mottled with darker patches of charcoal and ash where the heat has been most intense over the passing decades. The structure rises to about the height of your waist, creating a natural, elevated focal point that commands silent reverence. Though the day's heavy labor has ended and the artisans have gone to rest, the forge is never permitted to grow entirely cold. Deep within the central crater of the hearth, a bed of embers has been carefully banked for the night. These slumbering coals are buried beneath a soft, powdery blanket of pearl grey wood ash, which serves to insulate the fire and sustain its gentle breathing life until the dawn. Occasionally the ash shifts with a sound no louder than a falling leaf, revealing a mesmerizing, hypnotic glimpse of the glowing core beneath. This subterranean light is a profound, pulsating cherry red, a hue so rich and vibrant that it seems almost liquid in its intensity. It casts a localized, incredibly warm glow that illuminates the immediate perimeter of the hearth, painting the surrounding stones in soothing shades of amber and rose. Staring into this gentle breathing light is profoundly calming, a visual lullaby that easily anchors your wandering mind. Arranged in a deliberate, curving orbit around the slumbering hearth are the silent sentinels of the artisan's craft, the anvils. These are not the uniformly shaped, factory-produced blocks of modern times, but highly individualized tools, each forged by hand and carrying its own unique history and distinct character. Some are massive, squat cylinders of dense, blackened iron, weighing as much as a small boulder. They are designed to absorb the heaviest, most punishing blows of the shaping hammers without yielding a fraction of an inch, grounding the immense energy of the forge. Others are smaller, featuring delicately curved horns and specialized, highly polished concavities used for the fine finishing work that gives the singing bowls their perfect harmonious curvature. The surface of each anvil is a fascinating landscape of microscopic detail, waiting to be read by the hands of the master. Where the metal has been struck millions of times over the centuries, it has acquired a glassy, almost mirror-like polish that reflects the dim red light of the banked coals in distorted, elongated streaks. In other areas, the iron is etched with a fine network of hair-like scratches and tiny silvery indentations, a permanent physical record of the countless vessels that have been coaxed into existence upon these unforgiving surfaces. Standing beside these anvils in the quiet twilight of the room, surrounded by the heavy air, you can almost sense a residual vibration, a phantom resonance locked deep within the cold iron, silently holding the memory of 1,000 beautiful ringing strikes. Resting quietly in the deepest shadows just behind the grand hearth sits the magnificent apparatus that feeds the flames, the grand bellows. Constructed from beautifully aged, supple yak hide and heavy, polished cedar planks, this massive lung of the forge lies entirely dormant in the evening stillness. The leather is folded into deep, soft pleats, permanently creased from years of rhythmic expanding and contracting breath. When in motion it breathes roaring life into the fire, but now it rests heavily upon its sturdy wooden frame, a silent testament to the day's completed labor. The faint, sweet smell of the natural animal oils used to keep the hide wonderfully flexible lingers in the still air around it, adding yet another rich layer to the soothing, complex perfume of this ancient sanctuary. Everything in this room is at rest, patiently waiting for the morning, inviting you to share in its profound, unbroken slumber. Stepping away from the slumbering heart of the room, your gaze is drawn toward the peripheral shadows that cling to the gently curving stone walls. Here, illuminated only by the ambient, rosy glow of the banked embers, hangs an extensive, carefully curated array of hand-forged tools. These are the extensions of the master's own hands, the vital instruments that translate raw, earthly elements into vessels of divine resonance. There is no haphazard clutter here. Every hammer, tong, and chisel occupies a designated peg, resting in quiet readiness. Let us examine the hammers first. They line the wall in a descending order of sheer, imposing weight. The largest, known as grounding mallets, possess heads of dense, blackened iron the size of a human fist, designed to deliver the initial, commanding blows that flatten the molten alloy into yielding discs. Their wooden handles are marvels of slow, intentional wear. Carved from resilient Himalayan birch, they are polished to an incredibly smooth finish by decades of persistent use. The natural grain of the wood, a complex topography of pale golden ridges and dark honey-colored valleys, is entirely exposed, offering a grip that is both secure and immensely comfortable. Where the artisan's palm has rested most frequently, the birch has darkened dramatically, absorbing the natural oils of the skin to create a deep, lustrous patina that feels almost like polished stone to the touch. This darkening is a visual record of countless hours of focused, rhythmic labor, a silent testament to the enduring relationship between the maker and his chosen instrument. As you move down the line, the hammers gradually transition into more delicate, specialized forms. The shaping mallets feature elongated, gracefully tapered heads with gently rounded, striking faces, specifically engineered to coax the metal upward into its characteristic, bowl-like curvature without leaving sharp, unwanted indentations. Past the heavy mallets hang the tools of refinement and precise manipulation. Long-handled iron tongs used for safely extracting the glowing metal from the active forge's searing temperatures are suspended from thick wooden dowels. These tongs are astonishingly long, extending well over an arm's length to protect the craftsman from the radiant heat. Their jaws are varied, some flat and broad for gripping early ingots, others curved and delicate to securely hold the lip of a nearly finished bowl without marring its hammered surface. The handles of these tongs are often wrapped in tightly coiled strips of cured goat leather, a practical modification intended to insulate the user's hands against the conductive heat of the iron. Initially pale and stiff, this leather has transformed over the years into a supple, dark espresso color, softening to perfectly accommodate the master's grip. The scent of this aged leather, carrying a faint, dusty aroma mixed with the ever-present fragrance of wood ash, adds another rich, deeply comforting note to the olfactory tapestry of the workshop. Beneath the hanging tools, resting on a sturdy, low-slung workbench constructed from thick planks of rough-hewn pine, lie the smaller, more intricate implements, the detailing hammers, the tiny, sharp-edged chisels used for engraving the final decorative mantras, and the thick, coarse files used to smooth the rough outer edges of the newly formed vessels. Each tool, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, is impeccably maintained, reflecting a deep, almost spiritual respect for the process of creation. Turning your attention from the implements of shaping, you wander toward the deeper, cooler recesses of the forge, where the raw, unyielding elements patiently await their fiery transformation. Carved directly into the immense thickness of the northern stone wall are several deep, arched alcoves, These cavernous spaces serve as the sanctuary's storehouses, protecting the precious metals brought up through the winding mountain passes by weary caravans. In the first alcove, stacked with geometric precision, rest the dense ingots of pure copper. Even in the dim evening light, the copper exudes a breathtaking subterranean warmth. The metallic surface is not uniformly bright. Rather, it is a complex canvas of natural oxidation and terrestrial hues. Some edges glimmer with a radiant sunset orange, while other surfaces have matured into complex shades of bruised plum, rich mahogany, and a subtle earthy umber. In the deepest crevices of the stacked ingots, you can occasionally spot the delicate, powdery bloom of pale verdigris, a gentle reminder of the damp mountain air that constantly surrounds the sanctuary. The sheer density of the copper is palpable. It seems to anchor this corner of the room, radiating a silent, grounded energy. Adjacent to the copper, in its own slightly smaller alcove, lies the tin. These ingots present a stark, beautiful contrast to the warm richness of their neighbor. The tin is a cool, pale, luminous silver, possessing a slightly crystalline, almost frosted texture that catches the stray, wandering light from the banked hearth and scatters it in soft, pearlescent reflections. The juxtaposition of these two base elements, the warm, grounding copper and the cool, clarifying tin, foreshadows the acoustic alchemy that occurs when they are melded together in the crucible, creating an alloy capable of producing sounds that echo the very music of the spheres. Beyond the standard alloys, hidden within a brass-bound chest of polished cedar, resides the rarest and most revered element in the artisan's possession. This chest, resting quietly on a raised stone plinth to protect it from the dampness of the earthen floor, holds small, carefully guarded fragments of meteoric iron, known to the high mountain dwellers as sky metal. These unassuming, heavily pockmarked shards, deeply blackened by their fiery descent through the Earth's atmosphere, are not used in every creation. They are reserved only for the most sacred and significant commissions, meant to infuse the resulting singing bowl with a celestial frequency, a tangible connection to the vast, silent mysteries of the cosmos above. The presence of the sky metal in the room adds an undeniable layer of quiet reverence to the atmosphere. It is a peaceful acknowledgement that the work performed here is not merely a terrestrial craft, but a subtle dialogue between the grounding weight of the earth and the boundless, echoing expanse of the heavens. Just standing near the sturdy wooden chest, one can almost sense the ancient, dormant energy locked within the cold, starry fragments, waiting patiently to be released through the transformative power of the master's fire. Finally, nestled in the coolest, deeply shadowed corner of the workshop, lies the quenching basin. This is a monumental, monolithic trough, hand-carved from a single, massive block of porous, dark grey volcanic stone. Its exterior is rough and intricately textured, providing a stark contrast to the smooth, meticulously polished interior walls that hold the water. The basin is filled to the very brim with pure, icy runoff, diverted directly from a pristine, high-altitude glacier located far above the valley. This water is the literal lifeblood of the forging process, used to rapidly cool and temper the singing bowls, locking in their structural integrity and crystallizing their unique acoustic properties. The surface of the water is a perfectly still, unblemished mirror, entirely devoid of ripples in the quiet evening hours. It reflects the heavy, crisscrossing wooden beams of the ceiling and the faint dancing, cherry-red glow of the distant hearth, creating an inverted, dreamlike twin of the sanctuary within its dark, liquid depths. Faint, mineral-rich scent rises from the basin, smelling cleanly of wet stone, crushed ice, and the deep, silent chill of the unyielding mountain peaks. Fine, delicate layer of white mineral deposits rings the very edge of the dark stone, a watermark left behind by countless years of slow evaporation and replenishment. The absolute stillness of this dark pool is highly hypnotic, a perfect physical manifestation of the immense calm that permeates this entire slumbering forge. You are enveloped in a world where every object has a purpose, a history, and a silent, soothing voice of its own. Reluctantly drawing your gaze away from the hypnotic stillness of the quenching basin, you turn your attention toward a space that feels entirely distinct from the heavy, industrial heart of the main room, tucked into a slightly elevated alcove along the eastern wall. is the master artisan's private sanctuary, a raised platform constructed of thick pine planks that gently separates this area from the packed earth of the main floor. The wood here is lighter, worn incredibly smooth, where countless hours have been spent in seated concentration. This is not the place for roaring flames or the deafening crash of heavy iron against yielding copper. This is the quiet domain of refinement, of delicate calibration, and of the final, crucial touches that elevate a simple metal vessel into an instrument of profound acoustic magic. The energy in this alcove is focused and deeply introspective, radiating a sense of serene, deliberate patience. It is an environment crafted specifically to minimize distraction, allowing the master to fully attune his senses to the subtle, elusive frequencies trapped within the bronze. Stepping onto the raised wooden platform, you can feel the slight give of the ancient pine planks beneath your feet, a gentle, welcoming sensation that contrasts beautifully with the unyielding stone and hard-packed earth of the forge floor. The centerpiece of this quiet alcove is an exceptionally long, surprisingly low workbench. Unlike the heavy, scarred blocks used for the initial shaping near the fire, this table is a marvel of delicate woodworking. It is crafted from a single, unbroken slab of ancient walnut, a wood prized for its tight grain and resonant qualities. The surface of the table is breathtaking. It has never been painted or treated with harsh varnishes. Instead, it has been polished repeatedly over the years with natural beeswax and the softest woolen cloths. This meticulous care has resulted in a finish that is warm to the touch, possessing a deep, translucent luster that seems to glow from within, like polished amber. The grain of the walnut flows across the surface in long, mesmerizing, honey-colored rivers, occasionally interrupted by darker, complex knots that resemble tiny, swirling galaxies trapped within the wood. Run your hand lightly over the surface of this table. It is impossibly smooth, yet you can feel a subtle, undulating landscape, shallow, microscopic valleys created by the gentle, repetitive pressure of polishing stones and the soft friction of fine leather buffing pads. This table is not merely a surface for work. It is an active participant in the tuning process, designed to reflect and amplify the delicate vibrations of the singing bowls as they undergo their final inspection. The scent here is noticeably different from the rest of the room. The metallic tang and the heavy aroma of charcoal are subdued, replaced by the sweet, comforting fragrance of the melted beeswax and a very faint, almost imperceptible scent of dried mountain herbs that the master occasionally burns to clear the energy of the space. Scattered across the vast, smooth expanse of the walnut table are the instruments of acoustic calibration. These are not tools of force, but tools of listening. The most prominent among them is an array of wooden mallets known locally as pujas. These strikers vary significantly in size, weight, and composition, each specifically crafted to elicit a different tonal quality from the bronze. The handles are typically turned from durable woods like rosewood or rhododendron root, polished to a high sheen that fits perfectly in the palm of a hand. However, the true magic lies in the striking heads. Some are simply bare, polished wood, designed to bring out the bright, bell-like attack of a bowl. Others are meticulously wrapped in thick felted wool. This wool is not modern processed felt. It is coarse and fibrous, often retaining the subtle earthy lanolin scent of the high-altitude sheep from which it was shorn. The thickness of the felt wrapping determines the softness of the strike, allowing the master to tease out the deep, resonant, sustaining tones that form the foundation of a bowl's song. The most specialized pujas are wrapped in soft chamois leather, creating an intermediate texture that produces a complex, harmonic, rich hum when rubbed firmly around the rim of a finished vessel. Beside these strikers rests a collection of small, incredibly fine polishing stones. These are smooth, rounded river pebbles, hand-selected from icy mountain streams for their precise density and lack of abrasive grit. They are used to smooth away any microscopic burrs on the bowl's lip, ensuring that the friction created by the puja is perfectly continuous, allowing the sound to bloom without interruption or harshness. To the right of the workbench, resting on a low, intricately carved wooden stand, sits a peculiar and vital piece of equipment, a deep, wide basin carved entirely from tightly woven willow branches. This basket, astonishingly watertight due to an inner lining of natural pitch and hardened clay, is filled nearly to the brim with fine, dry river sand. The sand is incredibly uniform, a pale, dusty silver-grey colour, possessing a texture softer than flour. This is the testing bed. When a singing bowl nears completion, the master places it gently into this basin. The soft, yielding sand supports the delicate, vibrating walls of the metal vessel without dampening the sound in any way, unlike a hard surface which would absorb the resonance. More importantly, the master can use this setup to visually assess the acoustic properties of the bowl by filling the singing bowl with a precise amount of pure water and firmly striking its edge. The resulting sound waves travel through the metal and transfer into the liquid. This creates complex, mesmerizing geometric patterns on the surface of the water, tiny, rapidly shifting mandalas of vibrating ripples. The master watches these patterns intently, deciphering the visual representation of the sound. If the ripples are uneven or chaotic, the bowl requires further, microscopic tuning with a delicate file. Only when the water dances in perfect symmetrical harmony is the bowl considered complete. The silent presence of this sand-filled basin speaks volumes about the extraordinary level of precision and the profound dedication to harmony that defines this ancient craft. Hanging on the wall directly above the workbench is a small, beautifully crafted wooden shelf, holding the most precious objects in this private space. These are not tools, but sources of inspiration and spiritual grounding. A small, beautifully worn dorji, a ritual object representing the indestructible properties of a diamond and the irresistible force of a thunderbolt, often used in Tibetan Buddhism, rests on a piece of faded yellow silk. Its intricate, symmetrical brass prongs are softened by years of devotional handling. Next to it sits a small, very old brass bell, its handle shaped like the head of a serene deity. This bell is occasionally rung softly before the commencement of complex work, its high, pure tone meant to clear the mind and align the artisan's intention. Finally, there is a small, delicate incense burner shaped like a lotus blossom, currently empty but surrounded by tiny scattered flakes of dried juniper and frankincense resin. These small, significant items suggest that the creation of a singing bowl is not just a metallurgical process, but a deeply meditative and spiritual undertaking. The artisan is not simply shaping metal, they are forging a vessel for sound, a tool designed to bring balance and peace to the minds of others. In this quiet, elevated alcove, surrounded by the scent of beeswax, the beautiful polished walnut table, and the instruments of subtle calibration, you feel a profound sense of respect for the unseen, harmonic architecture of the world. It is a space that invites you to slow down, to listen closely to the silence, and to appreciate the invisible beauty that resonates through all things. Directing your gaze upward from the quiet intimacy of the master's workbench, you begin to explore the upper reaches of the sanctuary. The walls rise high into the enveloping darkness, leading to a series of narrow rectangular windows positioned just beneath the massive overhanging eaves. These are not windows of clear, modern glass, but rather exquisite panels of traditional Tibetan paper, meticulously crafted from the inner bark of the high-altitude Daphne plant. This paper, known as lokta, possesses a remarkable fibrous strength that allows it to withstand the immense pressure of mountain gales while still remaining wonderfully translucent. To protect the delicate fibers from the dampness of the snow and the biting chill of the air, the paper has been generously treated with a coating of natural, clarified yak butter and pine resin. This treatment gives the paper a rich golden amber hue, transforming the panels into glowing, rectangular canvases. As true night firmly settles over the Himalayan valley outside, the moonlight begins to filter through these oiled screens. The light does not pierce the room in harsh beams. Instead, it is diffused by the fibrous texture of the lokta, bleeding into the warm, rosy ambient light of the forge as a cool, ethereal silver mist. If you look closely at one of these high windows, you can trace the chaotic, beautiful web of plant fibers permanently suspended within the paper, a microscopic landscape of intersecting threads that tell the story of a distant, sun-drenched hillside. The wooden lattice framing these paper panes is carved with intricate, interlocking geometric shapes, casting faint, repeating shadows against the high stone walls. Occasionally, as the wind outside shifts direction, you can hear the faintest papery crinkle, a microscopic flexing of the oiled locta as it breathes with the changing barometric pressure of the valley, a sound so subtle it feels like a secret whispered only to you. Following the silver light upward to the very apex of the octagonal ceiling, you discover the architectural marvel that allows the forge to breathe, the central ventilation chimney. This is not a simple hole in the roof, but a complex multi-tiered structure of interlocking cedar planks designed to draw out the heavy toxic fumes of the smelting process, while absolutely preventing the ingress of rain, snow, or the freezing downdrafts of the mountain. The joinery of this chimney is a masterclass in ancient engineering, relying on precise angles and overlapping baffles that create a natural continuous updraft. Even now, with the great fire banked and slumbering, a thin, lazy ribbon of pale grey smoke rises from the central hearth, spiraling gracefully upward toward the dark square aperture. The movement of this smoke is incredibly slow, a hypnotic twisting dance that perfectly mirrors the unhurried pace of the evening. It rises in a tight coil, expanding and thinning as it encounters the slightly cooler air of the upper rafters, before finally being pulled effortlessly into the dark maw of the chimney. The wood surrounding this exhaust vent has undergone a profound transformation over the centuries. It is coated in a thick, velvety layer of pure carbon soot. This soot is not dirty or chaotic, rather it has accumulated in smooth, undulating waves, creating a texture that absorbs all light, appearing as a patch of absolute, infinite blackness against the dark brown of the cedar beams. It smells distinctly of deeply roasted pine needles, ancient ash, and the metallic breath of the crucible. Watching the thin ribbon of smoke ascend and disappear into this velvety void is deeply tranquilizing, a visual reminder of the continuous purifying cycle of the forge. Set into the massive, thick masonry of the upper walls, just below the level of the locta paper windows, are several small arched niches carved directly into the solid granite. These high alcoves are perpetually draped in heavy, impenetrable shadows, their contents completely obscured from the floor below during the working hours of the day. But now, in the stillness of the night, as your eyes fully acclimate to the delicate interplay of moonlight and embers, the faint silhouettes within these niches slowly reveal themselves. They are resting places for the retired elders of the forge, ancient, perfectly formed singing bowls that, for reasons known only to the master artisans who shaped them, were deemed too sacred or perhaps too acoustically unique to ever leave the valley. They sit in complete undisturbed silence, their metallic surfaces blanketed in a thick, undisturbed layer of pale grey dust that softens their curves and dulls their shine. This dust is a mixture of fine ash from the hearth below and pulverized stone blown in over decades, a soft powdery mantle that speaks of profound, uninterrupted time. Beside one of these dormant, silent bowls sits a tiny, unlit copper butter lamp, its edges oxidized into a brilliant, crusty verdigris. These objects are not forgotten. They are elevated, placed high above the daily toil to watch over the continuous cycle of creation. The air up here near the ceiling is noticeably warmer, forming a static thermal layer that holds the accumulated heat of the day's fire. This warmth presses gently against the cold stone of the walls, creating invisible microscopic currents of air that cause the smallest dust motes to dance in erratic swirling patterns whenever a stray beam of moonlight catches them. The energy in these high, shadowed alcoves is deeply protective, a silent, watchful presence that wraps the entire workshop in a comforting embrace of history and reverence. As you stand enveloped in the warm, softly lit cavern of the workshop, your awareness expands to encompass the profound contrast between the environment inside and the wild, untamed world that rages just beyond the thick stone walls. The Himalayan night outside is vast, freezing and indifferent, swept by high-altitude winds that scour the rocky peaks with invisible icy claws. Yet, inside this sanctuary, that terrifying acoustic landscape is reduced to a deeply soothing low-frequency hum. The monumental granite walls act as an impenetrable acoustic barrier, filtering out the harsh, chaotic noises of the wind and leaving only a deep, resonant bass note that vibrates through the very foundations of the building. You do not hear the wind so much as you feel it, a gentle rhythmic thrumming in the soles of your feet and the marrow of your bones. This continuous subliminal vibration interacts with the unique octagonal architecture of the room, creating a standing wave of sound that is incredibly peaceful. It is the sound of absolute safety, the auditory equivalent of a thick, heavy quilt pulled tight against the chin on a bitter winter night. The juxtaposition of the hostile, freezing expanse outside and the warm, golden, perfectly still womb of the forge inside magnifies your sense of comfort tenfold. Every element of this architecture, from the oiled paper windows that soften the moonlight, to the complex chimney that breathes for the room, to the massive stone walls that repel the cold, is working in perfect silent harmony to protect you. There is nowhere else you need to be. The demands of the world, the rush of time, the biting cold of the mountain, they are all locked outside. Within these ancient soot-stained walls there is only the gentle, radiant heat of the slumbering embers, the sweet, heavy scent of beeswax and ash, and the profound, unbroken silence of a world completely at rest. Allow yourself to sink fully into this impenetrable safety, letting the deep, rumbling hum of the protected sanctuary lull your thoughts into a state of heavy, dreamless calm. As the profound quiet of the evening deepens, settling into the very marrow of the heavy stone walls, one cannot help but reflect on the physical toll and the intimate, tactile reality of the daily life lived within this sanctuary. The creation of a singing bowl is not merely an act of metallurgical engineering, it is an incredibly demanding physical dialogue between the unyielding elements of the earth and the fragile, enduring flesh of the human body. To truly understand the profound stillness of this room, one must contemplate the instruments that brought this silence into being, the hands of the master artisan. These hands are a living landscape, a topographical map of decades spent in unwavering dedication to the forge. If you were to observe them resting in the warm, ambient light of the banked coals, you would see skin that has been transformed into something resembling soft, pliable leather. The palms are thick and heavily calloused, possessing a rugged, uneven terrain built up layer by layer to absorb the ceaseless percussive shock of the heavy iron-grounding mallets. The knuckles are slightly enlarged, a physical testament to a lifetime of gripping, twisting, and maneuvering massive tongs that hold glowing, fluid metal. Yet, despite this robust armor of hardened skin, the fingers possess a startling, elegant dexterity. The fingertips, though darkened by the indelible, microscopic dust of charcoal and oxidized copper, are incredibly sensitive, capable of feeling a flaw in the curvature of a bowl that is entirely invisible to the naked eye. The veins on the backs of these hands rise like quiet, subterranean rivers, carrying the slow, steady rhythm of a resting heartbeat. There is a profound, heavy fatigue locked deep within the joints of these hands at the end of the day, a beautiful, hard-earned exhaustion that makes the impending rest not just a necessity, but a deeply sacred reward. In a small, subtly recessed alcove located just to the left of the main entrance, away from the intense, lingering heat of the central hearth, sits the quiet station dedicated to the artisan's evening ritual of purification. This is where the physical remnants of the day's labor are gently washed away, marking the psychological transition from the focused intensity of creation to the peaceful surrender of the night. The centerpiece of this alcove is a wide, wonderfully shallow basin forged from solid brass. The exterior of this basin has been allowed to oxidize over the years, acquiring a gorgeous mottled patina of deep sea green and pale, chalky turquoise, resembling a miniature terrestrial globe. The interior, however, is polished to a flawless, mirror-like gleam, a golden concavity that catches the faint ambient light and cradles it softly. Beside the basin rests a tall, elegant ewer crafted from pure, unalloyed copper. Its surface is perfectly smooth, interrupted only by a gracefully curving spout and a sturdy, riveted handle wrapped in tightly braided yak leather for insulation. This ewer holds water drawn from the icy mountain stream just outside, but it has been left resting near the radiant heat of the forge throughout the afternoon, gently warming to a perfectly tepid, soothing temperature. When poured, the water falls into the brass basin with a hollow, melodic, trickling sound, a delicate liquid music that momentarily breaks the thick silence of the room before being swallowed up by the heavy acoustic dampening of the stone walls. Floating upon the surface of this warm water are a handful of crushed, dried botanicals, brittle, silver-green sage leaves and small dark juniper berries. As the warm water envelops them, these herbs release a subtle, deeply restorative fragrance into the cool air of the alcove, a scent that smells cleanly of high mountain forests, morning dew and gentle earthy camphor. To cleanse the skin of the day's heavy metallic burden, the artisan relies not on modern harsh soaps, but on an ancient, carefully guarded concoction passed down through generations of coppersmiths. This cleansing paste rests within a small, shallow bowl carved from a single dense burl of wild cherry wood, its surface polished smooth by decades of damp fingertips. The paste itself is a thick, earthy substance, the color of muted sun-baked ochre. It is a masterful blend of finely ground yellow mustard seeds, rich, mineral-laden river clay harvested from the banks of the valley's deepest gorge, and a small, precise measure of clarified, aged yak butter to provide a protective, moisturizing glide. When a small amount of this paste is scooped up and applied to the dampened hands, the sensory experience is immediately grounding. The crushed mustard seeds provide a coarse, pleasantly gritty texture, a gentle exfoliating friction that is perfectly suited to scrubbing away the stubborn, oily soot and the fine, invisible flakes of bronze that cling to the pores. As the hands are rubbed together in a slow, methodical, circular motion, a mild, deeply comforting heat begins to generate from the friction of the mustard seed against the calloused skin. The sound of this washing is hypnotic, a steady, rhythmic shh, shh, that echoes softly in the small space, resembling the sound of a distant, calm ocean shifting over a bed of tiny pebbles. The paste does not foam or lather. Instead, it transforms into a smooth, heavy slip, its ochre color slowly darkening to a murky charcoal gray as it successfully draws out the embedded impurities of the forge. The scent of the mustard seed, sharp and faintly spicy, mingles with the earthy aroma of the wet clay and the sweet, herbaceous steam rising from the brass basin, creating an olfactory environment that feels deeply purifying and completely natural. Once the deep-seated residue of the forge has been meticulously lifted, the hands are submerged into the warm, botanical-infused water of the brass basin. The sensation of the tepid water washing away the heavy clay paste is one of pure, unadulterated relief, a physical lifting of weight from the skin. The dark, grey-tinted water is then carefully drained through a small bronze-grated hole in the floor, returning to the earth below the foundations of the sanctuary. To dry the hands, a piece of thick, unbleached hemp cloth hangs from a simple wooden peg on the stone wall. This fabric is extraordinarily coarse and nubby to the touch, having been woven by hand on a traditional loom and dried in the harsh, sterilizing sunlight of the high altitudes. It smells faintly of the wind and the dry, golden grass of the summer meadows. As the artisan presses the rough hemp into the palms and between the fingers, the abrasive texture invigorates the skin, pulling the last remnants of moisture away and leaving the hands feeling incredibly clean, warm, and alive. The final essential step in this evening ritual is the application of a protective, restorative balm, stored in a small hollowed-out yak horn with a tightly fitted wooden stopper. This salve is a rich, golden unguent made from pure, raw beeswax, potent sea buckthorn oil, and a touch of sticky, aromatic pine resin. The balm is entirely solid in the cool air of the alcove, but the moment it touches the lingering warmth of the freshly washed hands, it begins to melt, transforming into a thick, luxurious oil. As it is slowly massaged into the skin, concentrating on the deepest calluses and the aching joints, the balm provides a profound, soothing nourishment. It leaves behind a subtle, lingering fragrance of honey, tart berries, and the deep, resinous heart of an ancient pine tree. The hands, now thoroughly cleansed, deeply nourished and glowing with a soft, protective sheen, finally come to rest. The heavy labor of the day is entirely washed away, and the physical body is now fully prepared to embrace the stillness, the quiet, and the profound restorative sleep of the long Himalayan night. Moving away from the purification alcove, your gaze is drawn to a smaller, far more intimate source of warmth nestled in the eastern corner of the workshop. While the great smelting hearth slumbers with the latent power of a volcano, this secondary fire is a gentle, domesticated companion. It is housed within a modest, low-slung stove constructed of smooth river stones, heavily plastered with a mixture of clay and chopped straw that has baked to a pale biscuit color over the years. This stove is not designed to melt iron. Its sole purpose is nourishment, offering a steady, manageable heat for brewing the evening tea. The fuel used here is noticeably different from the dense charcoal of the main forge. Here, the artisan burns small, dried branches of rhododendron and dwarf juniper, gathered from the high, wind-swept ridges. As these thin branches surrender to the flames, they do not roar or spit. Instead, they produce a soft, rhythmic whispering sound, a delicate crackle that resembles the crumbling of dry autumn leaves underfoot. The firelight here is entirely different as well, not the deep cherry red of the smelting coals, but a bright, cheerful, dancing orange that casts soft, flickering halos onto the surrounding stone. The smoke produced by this smaller fire is remarkably fragrant, smelling wonderfully sweet and deeply herbaceous. It winds its way slowly upward toward a secondary ventilation shaft, filling this cozy corner with a scent that instantly evokes the memory of sun-baked alpine meadows and the pure, thin air of the highest mountain passes. Resting directly atop the glowing orange embers of this small stove is a deeply scarred copper teapot. This vessel, a cherished companion through countless freezing winters, possesses a shape entirely unique to the Himalayan plateau. It is exceptionally tall, rising gracefully from a wide, stable base into a slender neck, culminating in a domed lid crowned with a stylized lotus bud cast in dark brass. The exterior of the teapot is a testament to its long service. It is completely blackened at the very bottom, a rich soot that gradually gives way to an astonishing array of oxidized colors along its curved sides, deep purples, warm oranges, and sudden streaks of pale seafoam verdigris. A heavy, intricate brass handle, fashioned to resemble an elongated snow lion, curves proudly down the back, its metal worn incredibly smooth where the artisan's thumb rests each evening. Inside this deeply textured vessel, pure glacial meltwater is slowly making its transition from ice-cold liquid to a rolling boil. You can hear this process unfolding in gentle, escalating sounds. It begins as a faint, distant hum, a low vibration felt as much as heard, then it transitions into a soft, murmuring simmer, like a hidden brook bubbling beneath fresh snow. Finally, as the water reaches its peak, a thin, sustained, and remarkably musical whistling sound escapes from the elongated spout, accompanied by a delicate, curling plume of pure white steam that dances in the warm air before dissolving into the shadows. To prepare the evening draught, the artisan reaches for an object that is as much a piece of history as the forge itself, a dense, heavily compressed brick of aged tea. This block of tea, transported over perilous mountain passes, strapped to the backs of weary yaks, is wrapped in a layer of tough, fibrous bamboo paper that crackles dryly as it is peeled back. The tea block is astonishingly hard, resembling a rectangular slab of dark, porous stone. It is almost entirely black, with very faint, russet-coloured veins running through its densely packed strata. When held to the nose, it exudes a profound, complex aroma. It does not smell of flowers or spring rain. It smells of deep, undisturbed earth, of ancient, damp cellars, of old leather, and a very subtle, sweet smokiness derived from years of slow aging. To harvest the leaves, the artisan uses a specialized implement, a small, sturdy knife with a handle carved from the porous bone of a yak. The blade is short and thick, designed for prying rather than slicing. With slow, deliberate, and incredibly precise movements, the artisan presses the tip of the bone-handled knife into the edge of the compressed brick, gently working it back and forth to loosen the ancient leaves without crushing them. The dried tea flakes off in small fragments, falling softly onto a pristine square of golden paper. The sound of the knife against the hard tea brick is a soft, rhythmic snick, 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 a deeply satisfying, tactile noise that grounds the mind and anchors the attention entirely on the simple, repetitive task at hand. The loosened flakes of dark tea are carefully tipped into the boiling water of the copper pot, immediately transforming the clear liquid into a rolling, intensely dark broth, the color of a starless midnight sky. But in this high, unforgiving climate, simple steeped tea is not enough to sustain the body and spirit. It requires rich fortification. From a small, beautifully carved wooden box resting on a nearby shelf, the artisan extracts a generous lump of aged yak butter. This butter, pale yellow and dense, carries a distinct savory aroma that speaks of high-altitude grasses. It is dropped directly into a tall cylindrical wooden vessel known as a traditional Tibetan tea churn. Following the butter, a small pinch of coarse pink rock, salt mined from ancient dried seabeds deep within the Himalayas, is added. Finally, the boiling, deeply steeped black tea is poured from the copper pot into the wooden churn, releasing a magnificent, billowing cloud of fragrant steam. Now begins the hypnotic, rhythmic process of churning. The artisan inserts a long wooden plunger fitted with a perforated disc at its base into the tall cylinder. With smooth, even strokes, the plunger is pushed down and pulled up, forcing the hot tea, the melting butter, and the pink salt to emulsify into a rich, creamy, unified broth. The sound of the churning is wonderfully soothing, a deep, resonant thump, swoosh, thump, swoosh that echoes softly against the stone walls. It is a slow, methodical heartbeat, a comforting domestic rhythm that counterbalances the heavy, metallic percussion of the daylight hours. When the tea is perfectly aerated and thoroughly blended, possessing a thick, velvety texture and a pale, creamy caramel color, the artisan prepares to pour. The vessel chosen to hold this precious evening comfort is not a simple cup, but a magnificent wide-mouthed bowl turned from the burled root of a rhododendron bush. The exterior of the bowl displays the chaotic, swirling grain of the root, polished to a warm, glowing mahogany. The interior is a masterpiece of the silversmith's art, lined entirely with a thin, flawlessly smooth layer of pure beaten silver. This silver lining serves a dual purpose. It purifies the liquid, and it reflects the ambient light, making the tea appear as though it is glowing from within. As the hot buttered tea is poured from the churn into the silver-lined bowl, it creates a soft, muffled, splashing sound. The silver instantly conducts the heat, warming the wooden exterior so that it feels wonderfully hot against the artisan's resting palms. Small, delicate beads of oil from the melted butter float upon the surface, catching the flickering orange light of the small stove and shimmering like tiny liquid topazes. Thick, fragrant mist rises from the bowl, carrying the complex, savory scent of the earthy tea, the rich butter, and the sharp, mineral tang of the salt. Lifting the bowl with both hands in a gesture of quiet reverence, the artisan takes the first slow sip. The tea is rich, heavy, and profoundly warming, coating the throat and spreading a deep, radiant heat outward from the center of the chest. It is a liquid comfort that instantly melts away the lingering cold of the mountain, signaling to the body that it is finally time to rest. Having savored the final grounding drops of the rich butter tea, the master artisan sets the silver-lined rhododendron bowl softly upon the wooden hearthside table. The metallic contact is muted, swallowed instantly by the thick quiet of the room. He rises slowly, his movements carrying the deliberate, unhurried grace of a man whose life is dictated not by the arbitrary hands of a clock, but by the natural, patient rhythms of fire and metal. He walks toward a small, secluded alcove situated on the northern wall, far from the grand forge and the quenching basin. This space is dedicated to a different kind of preservation. Here, nestled beneath a low-hanging, intricately carved wooden shelf, sits a slanted scribe's desk. It is an unassuming piece of furniture crafted entirely from heavily aged Himalayan juniper. The wood has never been varnished. Instead, it has been polished purely by the gentle friction of woolen sleeves leaning against it over countless quiet evenings. The grain is tight and pale, possessing a subtle, dry fragrance that smells beautifully of old resin, settling dust, and the profound stillness of a forgotten library. This slanted desk is illuminated by a single, slender beeswax candle resting in a heavily tarnished brass holder. The candle flame is exceptionally steady in the draught-free air, a perfect glowing teardrop that casts a small, intimate pool of buttery yellow light over the wooden surface. This light does not attempt to reach the high ceiling or the distant walls. It creates a microscopic universe of focused attention, a private sphere of warmth and quiet contemplation where the history of the forge is silently committed to memory. Resting squarely in the center of this slanted desk is the ledger of lineage, an object of immense quiet gravity. This is not a common merchant's accounting book, but a sacred registry, a physical chronicle recording the birth of every singing bowl forged within these heavy stone walls over the past 3 centuries. The binding of this massive volume is a masterwork of tactile history. It is covered in thick, undyed yak leather that has oxidized over the generations into a rich, complex shade of deep tobacco brown. The leather is astonishingly soft, possessing a texture akin to the finest, heaviest velvet, deeply burnished and smooth at the corners where countless thumbs have pressed against it to gently pry the heavy covers apart. Running your fingertips across this binding, you would feel a subtle, undulating topography of microscopic creases and natural imperfections in the hide, a physical testament to the enduring materials of the high plateau. The spine is incredibly thick, ribbed with heavy linen cords that secure the massive bundles of pages within. When the artisan slowly opens the ledger, the action releases a profound, evocative scent, a concentrated aroma of dry, fibrous paper, ancient dust, faint traces of old incense, and the lingering sweet vanilla scent of the natural binding glue. The sound of the book opening is a heavy, muffled creak, like the slow stretching of an old tree branch in the wind, followed by the soft, papery exhalation of the dense pages settling into a new position. The pages themselves are magnificent, thick, rough-hewn sheets of handmade locta paper, their edges delightfully uneven and slightly frayed, possessing the pale, creamy color of old ivory. Before a single mark can be made upon these pristine, waiting pages, the ink must be patiently drawn forth from solid matter. To the right of the open ledger sits a heavy, rectangular inkstone carved from a solid block of dark, non-porous slate. The stone is incredibly cold to the touch, and its surface features a shallow, sloping depression that ends in a slightly deeper, smooth well. Beside this slate rests a solid, rectangular stick of traditional soot ink. This ink stick is a small marvel of compression, made from the incredibly fine, velvety soot of burned pine boughs, meticulously mixed with natural animal hide glue and a few precious drops of crushed musk to softly ward off insects. The artisan lifts a tiny, celadon green porcelain water dropper, an object no larger than a quail's egg, and carefully dispenses a single perfect sphere of clear, icy water onto the high end of the slate inkstone. Taking the solid black stick between his thumb and forefinger, he begins to gently grind it against the moistened slate. The motion is perfectly circular, agonizingly slow, and intensely hypnotic. The sound produced is a rhythmic, whisper-soft grating, a dry, steady friction that serves as a profound acoustic anchor for the wandering mind. As the ink stick travels in endless patient circles, the clear water slowly transforms. It turns first to a pale, ghostly grey, then deepens to the rich colour of a stormy sky. And finally, after many long, unbroken minutes of rhythmic grinding, it achieves a state of profound, abyssal blackness. This liquid ink possesses a slightly viscous texture, clinging to the surface of the slate with a glossy, mirror-like sheen that perfectly catches the tiny dancing reflection of the nearby candle flame. The grinding process releases a sharp, slightly bitter, yet deeply clean scent from the pine soot, adding a wonderfully clarifying note to the heavy, sleepy air of the alcove. With the ink fully prepared, resting like a pool of liquid night in the deep well of the slate, the artisan selects his instrument of translation. There are no heavy metal nibs or imported quills here. The scribe relies exclusively on a simple, elegantly carved bamboo stylus. The bamboo is completely hollow, surprisingly light and perfectly balanced in the hand. Its exterior possessing a smooth, pale golden luster, the tip has been meticulously shaped with a razor-sharp carving knife to an exact angled point, allowing for both hair-thin, delicate lines and broad sweeping strokes depending purely on the subtle pressure applied by the fingers. The artisan dips the very tip of the bamboo into the dark ink. Through the silent, invisible magic of capillary action, The dark liquid climbs halfway up the angled cut, ready to be transferred to the waiting parchment. As the stylus touches the rough fibrous surface of the locta paper, a wonderful tactile dialogue begins. The sound of the bamboo gliding across the uneven texture is a dry, continuous scratch, a fragile, papery whisper that seems perfectly scaled to the absolute reigning quiet of the sleeping forge. The artisan begins to write, meticulously mapping the day's creations in flowing vertical columns of elegant Tibetan script. He does not merely record mundane numbers or commercial weights, he chronicles the very soul of the work. He notes the exact, painstaking ratio of pure copper to luminous tin, the subtle, magical inclusion of the rare meteoritic sky metal, the specific astrological phase of the moon during the initial smelting process, and the unique tresonant frequency the finished bowl produced when finally tested upon the soft sand bed. The visual contrast between the wet, glistening black ink and the dry, pale ivory of the fibrous paper is stark and profoundly beautiful. As the ink leaves the bamboo tip, it sits delicately upon the surface for a fraction of a second, catching the warm candlelight in a wet, raised dome, before slowly, definitively sinking into the thirsty, welcoming fibers of the paper. This absorption spreads the edges of the lines ever so slightly, giving the ancient script a soft, organic quality, as if the words are naturally growing out of the page itself rather than merely resting upon it. The artisan's breathing slows to perfectly match the deliberate flowing rhythm of his hand. He inhales deeply as the stylus lifts from the page and exhales in a long, steady stream as he executes a sweeping downward stroke. The entire process is a seamless, moving meditation, a silent, deeply focused communion between the master, the memory of the cooled metal, and the enduring nature of the written word. The physical world outside the thick stone walls, the biting, relentless Himalayan wind, the vast icy expanse of the peaks, the rapid, uncaring passage of centuries, feels entirely remote and irrelevant. In this small protected pool of candlelight, surrounded by the comforting scent of pine soot and old, yielding leather, time is beautifully suspended, captured forever in the slow, meticulous dance of bamboo upon paper. The heavy ledger gracefully absorbs the history of the day, securing it safely within its thick, velvet, soft binding, ensuring that the silent song of the slumbering forge will be remembered and revered long after the central fires have finally turned to cold grey ash. Closing the heavy, velvet, soft cover of the lineage ledger, the master artisan leaves the quiet sanctuary of the scribe's desk. The ancient, newly dried ink, now a permanent testament to the day's labour. He carries the single glowing beeswax candle with him, its teardrop flame wavering ever so slightly as he moves across the expansive rammed earth floor of the main forge. He bypasses the slumbering central hearth, moving toward a low, deliberately unassuming archway constructed of dark, unpolished river stones set into the southern wall. This archway frames a small, deeply recessed door crafted from thick, vertical planks of Himalayan cedar. Unlike the massive entrance doors of the sanctuary, this inner door is short, requiring a slight, respectful bow of the head to pass through. The wood here is heavily saturated with the unseen, airborne oils of countless generations of use, giving it a sticky, deeply resinous texture and a profoundly dark, almost bruised purple hue. The iron latch is small and simple, lifting with a soft metallic click that seems entirely swallowed by the density of the wood. Pushing the door open requires a gentle, sustained effort, as the hinges are thick with natural hardened sap. As the barrier slowly gives way, it exhales a breath of air so intensely aromatic and fundamentally different from the rest of the forge that stepping across the threshold feels like entering an entirely new, deeply concealed world. This is the chamber of patina, the final destination for the singing bowls before they are released into the world. A sunken, intimate space dedicated exclusively to the preservation and aesthetic perfection of the finished bronze. You descend 3 shallow curving steps to enter this room. These steps are carved directly into the living bedrock of the mountain, their surfaces polished to a glassy, frictionless sheen by centuries of soft cloth-wrapped footwear. The air in this sunken chamber is noticeably warmer and heavier than the main workshop, acting as a natural trap for the ambient heat radiating from the surrounding stone walls. But it is the scent of this room that is truly mesmerizing, an olfactory tapestry so rich and complex that it immediately coats the back of the throat with a phantom, lingering sweetness. It is an intoxicating blend of warm, molten beeswax, the sharp, clarifying bite of crystallized pine sap, the deep, grounding aroma of pulverized tree barks, and the faint, citrus-like whisper of exotic imported resins. This heavily perfumed air is profoundly calming, acting as a natural, invisible sedative that slows the heart rate and deepens the breath with every inhalation. The walls of this small chamber are entirely lined with beautifully constructed, floor-to-ceiling shelving, fashioned from rough-hewn pine boards that have naturally bowed over time under the immense weight of their contents. These shelves hold hundreds of small unglazed terracotta jars, each capped with a snugly fitting plug of carved cork or wrapped in tightly secured pieces of oiled parchment. The jars are not labeled with ink, instead they are identified by the subtle variations in their clay, the shape of their contours, and the unique faint aromas that manage to escape their porous confines. Moving toward a sturdy, waist-high wooden counter that spans the length of the back wall, the artisan sets his candle down, allowing its golden light to illuminate the tools of this delicate alchemy. Resting upon the center of the counter is a massive, irregularly shaped block of pure, unrefined beeswax. This wax was not harvested from domestic hives, but gathered by daring foragers from the sheer, dizzying cliffs of the high Himalayan valleys, where giant wild honeybees build their immense pendulous nests. The block is the color of a late afternoon sun, a deep, opaque amber, heavily marbled with streaks of darker, pollen-rich brown and tiny, fascinating specks of trapped dried meadow flowers. When the artisan runs a thumb across the surface of the block, it yields slightly to the body heat, possessing a wonderfully smooth, faintly tacky texture. The scent emanating from this single block of wax is breathtaking, a concentrated distillation of high-altitude wildflowers, sweet mountain clover, and the pure, thin air of the alpine summer. Beside the wax rests a specialized paring knife, its blade forged from soft brass rather than steel to ensure it never inadvertently sparks or scratches the delicate materials. The artisan takes the brass knife and begins to shave thin, curling ribbons of wax from the grand block. The sound of the blade moving through the dense wax is a deeply satisfying, continuous sh, sh, sh. A soft yielding friction that produces delicate, translucent curls that fall softly into a small waiting copper bowl. To create the perfect, enduring seal for a singing bowl, the pure beeswax must be fortified and transformed. From one of the many unglazed terracotta jars lining the bowed shelves, the artisan retrieves a handful of raw, unprocessed frankincense resin. These are not uniform, commercially produced pellets, but organic, wildly shaped tears of hardened tree sap, transported across vast, arid deserts before finally reaching this snowy sanctuary. In the dim, flickering candlelight, the resin tears resemble rough, uncut gemstones, glowing with an internal frosted light that ranges in color from pale, milky yellow to a deep, translucent gold. They are incredibly brittle, dusting the artisan's calloused fingertips with a fine, fragrant powder that smells sharply of ancient temples and sun-baked earth. To prepare these crystalline tears, they must be meticulously pulverized. The instrument chosen for this task is a magnificent heavy mortar and pestle, carved entirely from a single continuous piece of banded agate. The stone is a visual masterpiece displaying sweeping concentric waves of deep icy blue, pale grey and stark contrasting white. The interior of the mortar is smoothly concave, while the heavy bulbous end of the pestle is perfectly rounded to match its curve. As the artisan drops the frankincense tears into the agate bowl, they land with a sharp, bright musical clatter. He begins to grind them with a slow, heavy circular motion. The sound is an abrasive, rhythmic crunching that slowly transitions into a soft, powdery squeaking as the brittle crystals are broken down into an impossibly fine, pale golden dust. The friction of the agate stone releases the volatile oils trapped within the resin, causing the heavy air of the sunken chamber to immediately bloom with an intense, deeply clarifying fragrance that tingles at the very edge of the senses. The shaved curls of wild beeswax and the pulverized golden dust of the frankincense are carefully combined within a tiny specialized copper crucible. This vessel, possessing a deeply rounded bottom and a long, straight handle wrapped in insulating wool, is suspended over a miniature, highly controlled heat source. Sitting upon the wooden counter is a small, beautifully cast iron brazier, no larger than a melon, resting on 4 delicate, stylized feet. Within the belly of this brazier rests a single, perfectly formed cube of hardwood charcoal, coaxed into a state of sustained, glowing life by a few gentle breaths from the artisan. The heat radiating from this solitary coal is incredibly focused and remarkably gentle. As the copper crucible is positioned over the dull red glow, the alchemy slowly begins. The translucent curls of beeswax soften, slump, and eventually dissolve into a rich golden liquid, bubbling softly at the edges with a sound akin to a quiet, simmering brook. The fine frankincense powder is meticulously stirred into this molten base using a slender rod of smooth, polished bone. As the two elements merge, the liquid transitions from a clear amber to a slightly cloudy, complex and deeply aromatic suspension. The stirring is hypnotic, a slow, endless figure-8 pattern drawn through the warm liquid, ensuring the resin is perfectly and evenly distributed. The scent rising from the crucible is now a masterpiece of olfactory harmony, blending the sweet, floral innocence of the high meadow wax with the ancient grounding and sharply reverent character of the desert resin. With the protective patina fully prepared and held at the perfect fluid temperature, the artisan turns his attention to a freshly forged naked singing bowl, resting quietly in the shadows at the edge of the counter. This bowl, having passed the rigorous acoustic tests of the sandbed, is currently a raw, vulnerable canvas of dull, matted bronze. To apply the warm liquid mixture, he reaches for a polishing cloth that is as specialized as any metal tool in the forge. It is a large, irregularly shaped piece of incredibly soft chamois leather, cut from the hide of a native mountain antelope. This leather has been washed, stretched, and pounded until it possesses a texture that feels almost liquid, softer than the finest silk velvet. It is a deep, lived-in beige color carrying the faint, comforting scent of natural lanolin and decades of absorbed oils. The artisan dips a corner of this unbelievably soft leather into the warm, liquid mixture of wax and resin, taking up only a microscopic amount. He then presses the leather against the cold, unyielding curve of the bronze bowl, beginning a slow, methodical, and profoundly rhythmic process of application and buffing. His hand moves in endless overlapping circles, working the warm, protective compound deep into the microscopic pores of the hammered metal. The sound of the soft chamois gliding over the smooth bronze is a continuous, deeply soothing hush, 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 a frictionless whispering sound that lulls the active mind into a state of heavy, compliant rest. As the wax cools and bonds with the metal, the dull, lifeless bronze undergoes a miraculous transformation. It begins to capture the ambient candlelight, slowly developing a deep, flawless, mirrored sheen that seems to emanate from within the alloy itself. The bowl is no longer just a shaped piece of metal, it is now sealed, protected, and visually awakened, cloaked in a fragrant golden armor that will preserve its voice for centuries to come. The endless, repetitive, and deeply gentle motion of the artisan's hand, combined with the intoxicating, heavy perfume of the small chamber, creates an atmosphere of such profound, suffocating peace that simply observing the process makes the eyelids grow incredibly heavy, inviting the irresistible, welcoming embrace of absolute slumber. Leaving the deeply perfumed, sunken chamber of patina, the artisan carefully carries the newly sealed singing bowl back out into the expansive, shadowy main hall of the sanctuary. The bowl now possesses a magnificent mirrored sheen, reflecting the dying embers of the central hearth as a distorted, curving pool of liquid fire upon its dark bronze surface. But a singing bowl, no matter how perfectly forged and flawlessly polished, is functionally incomplete on its own. It cannot be placed directly upon the hard, unforgiving stone, nor can it rest permanently on the raw wooden planks of the workbench. To do so would stifle its delicate voice, trap its resonance, and invite harsh, jarring vibrations when the metal is eventually struck. It requires a dedicated, perfectly balanced foundation, a resting cushion specifically tailored to its unique dimensions, curvature, and immense physical weight. To fulfill this essential need, the artisan navigates toward the westernmost alcove of the forge, an area entirely removed from the lingering heat of the fires and the heavy metallic percussion of the iron anvils. Here, resting in the quiet silver light filtering down from the high loctor-paper windows, sits an ancient, deeply complex wooden loom. This machine of creation is constructed from beautifully aged pale mountain ash, its myriad beams, levers, and heavy pedals worn incredibly smooth by generations of patient rhythmic movement. The loom is a silent, imposing skeleton of wood and tension, smelling faintly of old dust, dried lanolin, and the subtle, lingering, earthy scent of crushed botanical dyes. It waits patiently in the cool shadows, a complex instrument of textile alchemy ready to weave the soft, welcoming bed upon which the heavy metal vessel will ultimately rest. Beside the towering wooden loom, resting upon the cool earthen floor in several deep, wonderfully woven rattan baskets, lie the raw materials of this gentle, silent craft. The artisan reaches his hand into the largest basket, his calloused fingers sinking deep into a voluminous mound of freshly spun, incredibly dense yak wool. This wool is not the coarse, wiry, protective outer hair used for the heavy entrance curtains, but the incredibly soft, downy undercoat that shields the mountain beasts from the lethal sub-zero temperatures of the highest Himalayan peaks. It possesses a heavy, luxurious weight and a profound, earthy scent that instantly transports the mind to vast, snow-swept pastures and pale, distant winter suns. The wool has been painstakingly hand-dyed using only the natural foraging elements of the surrounding mountain valley. There are thick skeins of thread dyed a deep, mesmerizing crimson using the crushed roots of the wild madder plant, a color so rich and saturated it seems to hold its own internal radiant heat. Beside them rest heavy bundles of thread colored a profound midnight indigo extracted from fermented indigo leaves and carrying a slightly sharp, almost metallic scent that contrasts beautifully with the heavy earthiness of the raw wool. And finally, there are vast quantities of thread in various shades of warm, grounding brown, achieved by patiently boiling the thick green resinous hulls of indigenous mountain walnuts. The artisan deliberately selects a large spool of the deep madder red and a tightly wound spool of the midnight indigo, mounting them onto the smooth, polished wooden pegs of the loom. The warp threads, the foundational vertical strings drawn tightly across the heavy frame of the loom, are already meticulously in place, forming a pale, taut grid of undyed, highly twisted hemp. They sing with a faint, high-pitched, vibrating hum when gently brushed by a fingertip, a subtle, stringed precursor to the heavy, resonant acoustic music the completed singing bowl will soon produce. The master artisan takes his seat upon a low, surprisingly comfortable, backless wooden bench positioned precisely before the face of the loom. His feet, clad in soft, silent, felted wool slippers, unerringly locate the smooth, deeply polished wooden treadles below in the darkness. With a slow, deliberate, and perfectly even pressure, he depresses the right treadle, causing exactly half of the tight hemp warp threads to smoothly separate from the others, rising to create a narrow, horizontal tunnel known as the shed. Into his right hand he takes the shuttle, a beautifully carved, boat-shaped piece of remarkably dense, heavy boxwood that cradles the spinning bobbin of deep red wool. The wood of this shuttle is polished to an absolute frictionless mirror shine from decades of use, feeling remarkably like a large, heavy, water-smoothed river stone resting in the palm. With a fluid, highly practiced and effortless flick of his wrist, he sends the heavy wooden shuttle gliding seamlessly through the open shed. The sound produced is a delightful dry swish, a frictionless whisper of smooth wood passing rapidly through taut hemp fibers. Instantly his feet shift, depressing the left treadle. The warp threads reverse their vertical positions, crossing over and trapping the newly laid red weft thread securely within their alternating, unyielding grip. Then comes the grounding heartbeat of the loom. He grasps the heavy, swinging wooden beater bar, a comb-like structure known as the reed, and pulls it firmly toward his chest to meticulously pack the red thread tightly against the growing fabric. The resulting sound is a profound, incredibly satisfying thwack, thwack, a heavy wooden percussion that echoes gently off the high stone walls and absorbs deeply into the chest. Swish, treadle, thwack, thwack. The rhythm is officially established. It is a remarkably slow, methodical, and deeply hypnotic cadence. The artisan does not rush the process. He allows the endlessly repetitive motion to naturally guide his breathing, falling effortlessly into a state of profound, moving, and productive meditation. As the quiet hours of the night slip by, entirely unnoticed and completely irrelevant to the task at hand, the heavy fabric slowly materializes upon the thick wooden roller at the base of the loom. It is a thick, incredibly dense and rugged textile, featuring a complex repeating geometric pattern of the deep madder crimson and the midnight indigo, ancient motifs symbolizing the eternal knot of life and the boundless protective expanse of the night sky. The tactile texture of the woven cloth is magnificent, a rigid, heavily ribbed and structural surface that feels deeply grounding to the touch. Easily strong enough to support the immense, localized weight of the bronze, yet soft enough to absorb and diffuse any unwanted harsh acoustic vibrations. Once a perfectly measured length of this magnificent fabric has been woven, the artisan carefully and precisely cuts it free from the heavy tension of the loom, using a pair of heavy forged iron shears. The sound of the sharp blades slicing through the taut hemp threads is a crisp, decisive snip, 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 a sudden, brief punctuation mark in the heavily quiet room. He moves to a wide, flat work table constructed of pale pine, laying the beautifully patterned fabric face down upon the clean wood. With highly practiced, precise movements, he folds the raw edges inward, manipulating the thick cloth into a perfect, hollow, continuous ring. To stitch the structural seams, he utilizes a length of thick, heavily waxed linen thread and a long, gracefully curved iron needle, pulling the heavy stitches incredibly tight so that the seams become virtually invisible, buried deep within the thick wool. But the resting cushion is not merely an empty decorative shell. Its true magic and its functional purpose lies entirely within its hidden filling. From a large, coarse burlap sack resting heavily beneath the pine table, the artisan slowly scoops up a deeply carved wooden bowl brimming with dried, deeply roasted buckwheat hulls. These tiny, triangular, dark brown natural husks are incredibly light, geometrically complex, and entirely devoid of any residual moisture. They smell wonderfully and distinctly of baked summer grain, dry harvest fields, and the faint, nostalgic memory of distant wood smoke. He begins to slowly, carefully pour the roasted buckwheat hulls into the small, final opening left in the woven woolen ring. The sound of the thousands of tiny hulls cascading gently into the dark fabric chamber is absolutely mesmerizing, a continuous, dry, whispering, rustling noise that perfectly and seamlessly mimics the sound of a gentle, steady autumn rain falling endlessly upon a thick, dry canopy of fallen leaves. It is a natural white noise of the highest possible order, incredibly soothing, mind-clearing, and deeply soporific. The artisan fills the heavy cushion densely, pausing frequently to massage, knead, and meticulously pack the loose hulls firmly into the sweeping curves of the fabric, ensuring there are absolutely no empty pockets or areas of structural weakness. The roasted buckwheat hulls possess a unique, magical physical property. They interlock with one another under downward pressure, creating a firm, unyielding base that will perfectly conform to the specific microscopic curvature of the singing bowl placed upon it, while never entirely flattening or losing its supportive, shock-absorbing loft. Once the woolen cushion is packed to its absolute stretching limit, feeling satisfyingly heavy, dense, and remarkably solid in the hands, the artisan meticulously sews the final, small opening securely closed with the curved iron needle. The resulting object is a masterpiece of functional, unseen art, a beautiful, heavy, perfectly circular ring of patterned yak wool, smelling faintly of roasted grain, beeswax, and ancient natural dyes. He carries this newly birthed foundation and places it gently onto the flawlessly polished walnut surface of his private workbench. Then, lifting the freshly waxed, deeply gleaming singing bowl with both strong hands, he slowly, reverently lowers it onto the awaiting cushion. The heavy bronze settles into the thick fabric with a soft, barely perceptible, settling sigh. The thousands of tiny buckwheat hulls shift microscopically deep within the wool, perfectly cradling the rounded bottom of the heavy vessel, locking it instantly into an embrace of absolute, unyielding, perfect physical balance. The visual harmony in the candlelight is breathtaking. The dark, glowing, perfectly smooth bronze resting flawlessly upon the intricate, colourful, textured geometry of the wool. The singing bowl is finally truly grounded, fully prepared to sing its ancient song, resting securely in a state of perfect, heavily supported and unshakable peace. The artisan moves away from the perfect, silent equilibrium of the newly seated singing bowl, his footfalls utterly noiseless upon the hard-packed earthen floor. He turns his meticulous attention toward a long, beautifully carved wooden chest resting upon a low, raised stone plinth near the eastern wall. This chest is the dedicated resting place for the pujas, the highly specialized, handcrafted, striking mallets that act as the vital physical translators between human intention and the silent, waiting bronze. The chest itself is a masterpiece of local patient carpentry, fashioned entirely from a single massive burl of ancient Himalayan cedar. The wood is a mesmerizing, chaotic tapestry of swirling grain, a visual record of the tree's incredibly slow, twisting growth amidst the harsh, unyielding alpine winds. The exterior is completely unadorned, relying solely on the breathtaking natural topography of the polished wood for its undeniable beauty. The heavy lid is secured by two thick, hand-forged brass hinges, perfectly balanced so that lifting the dense slab of cedar requires no more physical effort than turning the heavy parchment page of an old book. As the lid slowly, gracefully rises, it releases a sudden, concentrated exhalation of the deeply fragrant interior, a scent that beautifully and seamlessly marries the spicy, warm, resinous aroma of the cedar wood with the soft, dusty, comforting sweetness of aged, heavy textiles. The interior of the chest is meticulously divided into dozens of narrow individual compartments, each one entirely lined with a thick, plush velvet fabric that has been dyed a deep, mesmerizing shade of twilight blue. Resting securely within these soft, yielding blue cradles are the master's mallets, arranged with absolute precision according to their size, weight, and the specific microscopic density of their striking heads. They lie in perfect, undisturbed silence, looking less like simple artisan tools and more like a collection of dormant, magical instruments awaiting the gentle touch of their creator. In the incredibly dry, moisture-starved atmosphere of the high Himalayas, wood is in a constant, silent, invisible battle against extreme desiccation. Without meticulous routine and deeply loving care, the dense hardwoods used for the mallet handles would eventually turn brittle, developing microscopic structural fractures that could absorb, distort, and tragically deaden the pure acoustic energy of a strike. Therefore, before the night is fully surrendered to sleep, the artisan engages in a deeply soothing, highly tactile ritual of nourishment. He deliberately selects 3 of his most heavily favored pujas from their soft velvet beds. The first possesses a handle turned from deeply aged, flawless rosewood, a material so incredibly dense it feels almost like polished river stone to the touch, its surface a rich dark burgundy streaked with mesmerizing winding rivers of absolute black. The second is painstakingly carved from the gnarled subterranean root of a high-altitude rhododendron bush, boasting a lighter, warm, honey-colored complexion peppered with fascinating tiny dark knots that resemble distant, forgotten constellations. The third is a specialized, massive grounding mallet, its thick handle formed from the pale, incredibly resilient core of Himalayan birch, engineered specifically for coaxing out the deepest, most sustained foundational tones of the largest vessels. He lays these 3 magnificent, heavy instruments softly upon the clean, unvarnished expanse of his pine workbench, the solid wooden handles making a hollow, deeply satisfying, muted thunk as they make contact with the table. They are exquisitely beautiful in their raw, functional simplicity, completely devoid of any unnecessary decorative ornamentation, their true, incalculable value lying entirely in their perfect physical balance and their unique capacity to coax absolute harmony from the cold, heavy bronze. To revive and fully protect the thirsty ancient wood, the artisan reaches into a small, deeply shadowed alcove positioned just above the workbench and extracts a tiny, exquisite vessel of pale, frosted glass. This small, delicate bottle was not crafted anywhere within this valley, but was carried across treacherous, icy mountain passes from a distant, ancient desert trade route many decades ago. The frosted glass is delightfully and wonderfully imperfect, heavily populated with tiny, trapped air bubbles that catch the ambient, flickering candlelight, making the vessel appear as if it is slowly, steadily breathing in the shadows. It is tightly sealed with a carefully fitted stopper carved from soft, highly porous cork, which has deeply absorbed the precious, heavy liquid within, turning a deep, translucent, glowing amber over the years. As the artisan gently twists and pulls the small cork, it releases from the narrow glass neck with a soft, incredibly satisfying thwomp, instantly and generously liberating the rich, intoxicating fragrance of the golden oil locked inside. This is not a common heavy animal fat or a simple beeswax, but a rare, deeply nourishing, highly specialized elixir pressed slowly and patiently from the sun-dried kernels of sweet mountain apricots. The pristine apricot oil has been carefully and deliberately infused over many long, dark, freezing winters with the freshly crushed, intensely fragrant tips of silver fir and tiny, sharp shards of dried, exotic cinnamon bark. The resulting complex aroma is a masterpiece of sensory comfort, a delicate, heavy, nutty sweetness perfectly and flawlessly balanced by the sharp, clarifying, clean scent of the high alpine forest and the warm, lingering, exotic spice of the southern trade routes. It is a deeply complex scent that immediately warms the chest, slowing the breath and evoking heavy, sleepy memories of late summer harvests and the comforting, radiant heat of a roaring hearth fire on a bitterly cold, windswept night. Tipping the frosted glass bottle ever so slightly, with agonizing, patient precision, the artisan allows a single perfect, heavy, golden drop of the apricot and fir oil to fall exactly into the center of his deeply calloused, waiting palm. The thick oil catches the dancing orange light of the distant brazier, shimmering for a moment like a tiny liquid topaz before slowly beginning to spread and sink across the heavy worn lines of his skin. He sets the delicate glass bottle down with a soft musical clink upon the pine table and picks up the heavy, dark, smooth rosewood mallet. Bringing his thoroughly oiled palm to the very base of the handle, he begins to rhythmically, meticulously, and slowly massage the heavy golden liquid deep into the thirsty, winding grain of the ancient wood. The physical action is incredibly slow, a deliberate, twisting, continuous motion that applies a firm, perfectly even pressure along the entire length of the polished handle. The acoustic sound of his rough, calloused skin moving against the dense, highly polished rosewood is a dry, continuous, mesmerizing, whispering friction, a gentle, rhythmic shh, shh that perfectly and flawlessly matches the slow, steady, heavy rhythm of his deep evening breathing. As the heavy oil penetrates the microscopic, waiting pores of the wood, the visual transformation is absolutely stunning and deeply satisfying to observe. The dull, slightly chalky, dry surface of the rosewood instantly darkens, springing vividly to life as the rich underlying burgundy and black tones become impossibly deep, vibrant, and radiantly healthy. The dense wood seems to eagerly, silently drink the rich nourishment, absorbing the heavy oil completely, without leaving any sticky slick or unnatural residue behind on the surface. The slow, continuous friction of the artisan's heavy hand generates a very faint, deeply localized heat within the wood, which in turn gently coaxes the complex, nutty, and highly resinous perfume of the infused oil to rise and slowly mingle with the ambient, heavy, sleepy scents of the vast forge, creating an immersive olfactory environment of unparalleled, suffocating, and absolute peace. Once the solid wooden handles have been deeply and thoroughly nourished, completely restored to their radiant, smooth, tactile glory, the artisan turns his exacting, patient attention to the delicate, fibrous striking heads of the heavy mallets. The vital preservation of these soft, yielding surfaces requires an entirely different, highly delicate, and incredibly gentle approach. The massive, pale birch mallet features a thick, striking surface wrapped in multiple layers of heavy, undyed, coarse yak felt. Over many long weeks of continuous heavy percussive use against the bronze, the microscopic interlocking fibers of this felt can naturally become compressed, flattened and slightly matted, losing their crucial necessary ability to soften and diffuse the aggressive initial attack of the heavy strike. To meticulously remedy this invisible wear, the artisan utilizes a highly specialized, very small brush, its lightweight handle carved from hollow bamboo, and its short bristles fashioned entirely from the stiff, incredibly resilient pale hairs of a mountain boar. With short, rapid, and unbelievably feather-light strokes, he gently and rhythmically sweeps the stiff bristles across the curved surface of the thick felt. The resulting sound is a highly textured, soft, rhythmic scratching, resembling the deeply relaxing noise of dry, brittle autumn leaves blowing gently across a smooth, paved stone courtyard. This highly delicate, repetitive friction meticulously separates, lifts, and perfectly realigns the deeply matted woolen fibers, completely restoring the felt's natural airy loft and its crucial, spongy, shock-absorbing springiness. For the dark rosewood mallet, which is tightly and flawlessly bound in a smooth, seamless layer of incredibly soft, suited chamois leather, the stiff boar bristle brush is deemed far too harsh and abrasive. Instead, he quietly retrieves a small, perfectly square block of pure, dry, highly porous volcanic pumice stone. Using only the absolute bare minimum of downward pressure, he rubs the dry, chalky stone across the curved surface of the leather in slow, continuous, mesmerizing circles. This incredibly gentle, dry abrasion effectively lifts away any invisible, accumulated natural oils or microscopic, oxidized metallic dust transferred from the raw bronze bowls, carefully raising the microscopic, velvety nap of the suede until it feels impossibly softer than the delicate petals of a freshly blooming mountain lotus. This complete, silent, deeply focused devotion to the maintenance of these simple, humble instruments speaks to a profound, unspoken truth of the ancient sanctuary. Absolutely every object, no matter how small, silent, or seemingly insignificant, plays an absolutely vital, foundational role in the ultimate creation of perfect, resonant, and enduring peace. With the mallets perfectly nourished and resting quietly upon the pine workbench, the artisan turns his attention to the final, most sacred ritual of the evening's labor. It is time for the newly forged, perfectly cushioned bronze vessel to take its very first breath, to sing its inaugural note into the dense, expectant air of the sanctuary. But a singing bowl must not be tested empty. It requires the grounding weight and the visual translation of pure, unblemished water. From a deeply shadowed, cool recess carved into the solid granite of the northern wall, he retrieves a tall, elegantly slender ewer crafted entirely from pure beaten silver. This vessel, unlike the heavily oxidized copper teapot used for the evening hearth, is polished to an immaculate, flawless, blinding mirror finish. The silver is incredibly cool to the touch, retaining the absolute chill of the deep stone alcove. As the ambient warm air of the forge meets the freezing surface of the silver ewer, a delicate velvety layer of pale condensation immediately begins to bloom across its smooth, curving contours. This microscopic frost dulls the mirror shine, transforming the bright silver into a soft, glowing, pearlescent white, looking exactly like a vessel carved from solid moonlight. Inside this magnificent ewer rests water drawn at the very break of dawn, harvested from a pristine high-altitude glacier stream remaining frozen for 9 months of the year. This water is the literal liquid embodiment of the Himalayan peaks, mineral-rich, shockingly cold, and devoid of any terrestrial impurities. The handle of the silver ewer is formed in the shape of a leaping snow leopard, its spots rendered in tiny, meticulous indentations created by a master silversmith's punch. The artisan's thumb rests perfectly within the curve of the leopard's neck, finding a natural ergonomic groove worn smooth by centuries of careful, deliberate pouring. He carries this heavy liquid treasure across the hard-packed earthen floor, his footsteps completely silenced by the felted wool of his slippers, moving with the slow, reverent grace of a high priest approaching a sacred altar. He comes to a halt before the private workbench, where the heavily waxed bronze bowl sits in perfect, unyielding equilibrium upon its woven yak wool and roasted buckwheat cushion. He positions the silver ewer directly over the wide-open mouth of the silent bronze bowl, tilting it with agonizingly slow, controlled precision. The first drop of glacial water falls from the elegantly flared spout, suspended for a fraction of a second in the flickering candlelight, looking exactly like a heavy, flawless falling diamond. When this solitary drop strikes the bottom of the empty bronze bowl, it produces a sharp, clear, incredibly musical tink, a sound that echoes brightly against the high stone walls. This single bright note is immediately followed by a continuous, perfectly smooth ribbon of pure water. The pouring of the liquid is a masterful display of physical control. The stream is no thicker than a single strand of heavy woolen yarn, unbroken, absolutely silent as it falls through the air, only producing sound when it merges with the growing pool at the bottom of the bronze vessel. The acoustic profile of the filling bowl is mesmerizing to witness and to hear. It begins as a hollow, deep, resonant splashing, but as the water level slowly, steadily rises against the curving bronze walls, the pitch of the splashing gradually and musically ascends, changing from a deep, cavernous echo into a high, cheerful, bubbling brook. The artisan watches the water level with absolute, unwavering focus, waiting for the exact, perfect volume. He knows instinctively, through decades of silent practice, that too little water will cause the bowl to sound thin and overly bright, while too much water will completely suffocate the resonance, preventing the metal from vibrating freely. When the water level reaches exactly 1 inch below the thick, polished rim of the bowl, he smoothly and effortlessly tilts the silver ewer backward, cutting off the liquid ribbon with absolute precision. The surface of the water within the bowl ripples gently for a few fleeting moments, catching the orange glow of the distant embers, before slowly settling into a state of absolute, flawless, glass-like stillness. The vessel is now fully prepared. The artisan gently sets the silver ewer aside, placing it upon a small, folded piece of linen to prevent any harsh clinking against the wooden table. He reaches out and selects the heavily oiled, perfectly conditioned rosewood mallet wrapped in the flawless suède chamois leather. Before he makes any attempt to strike the bronze, he must first perfectly align his own physical and mental state with the task at hand. The creation of sound in this sanctuary is never a casual or forceful act. It is a collaborative dialogue between the human spirit and the natural elements. He stands incredibly still, his feet planted firmly shoulder-width apart upon the raised wooden platform, grounding his energy deep into the earth below. He closes his eyes and takes 3 long, incredibly slow, deeply measured breaths. With each inhalation he draws in the heavily perfumed, sleepy air of the forge, the beeswax, the pine soot, the apricot oil, and the ancient dust. With each exhalation he consciously releases any lingering muscular tension, letting his shoulders drop heavily, allowing his arms to hang loose and relaxed at his sides. The profound, overarching silence of the room seems to thicken around him, becoming a tangible, physical presence, an acoustic canvas waiting patiently for the very first brushstroke of sound. He opens his eyes, focusing entirely on the outer edge of the waiting bronze bowl. He raises his right hand, holding the rosewood mallet with a grip that is light, almost entirely loose, allowing the heavy wooden tool to balance perfectly upon the fulcrum of his index finger. The strike itself is not a downward blow, but a sweeping, horizontal, glancing caress. He brings the leather-wrapped head of the mallet toward the upper rim of the bowl in a slow, graceful, sweeping arc, akin to the slow, heavy wingbeat of a soaring eagle. The exact moment of contact between the soft, yielding chamois leather and the cold, unyielding bronze is entirely silent, a microscopic compression of fibers that cushions the impact. But a fraction of a second later, the physical force of the strike is transferred perfectly into the molecular structure of the metal, and the bowl finally, magnificently exhales. The sound does not begin as a note you hear with your ears. It begins as a profound, heavy, low-frequency vibration that you feel deeply within the soles of your feet, traveling up through the bones of your legs to settle heavily within the center of your chest. This foundational grounding hum is immense, rolling outward in slow, invisible, concentric waves that physically push against the heavy air of the room. From this deep tectonic foundation, the higher frequencies slowly begin to bloom and detach, rich, perfectly sustained, incredibly pure mid-tone emerges, singing with the startling clarity of a distant giant bell ringing across a snow-covered valley. The sound is entirely devoid of harshness, completely lacking any metallic edge or jarring attack. It is round, warm, and endlessly expansive, wrapping around the listener like a heavy velvet blanket. But the true magic is visible upon the surface of the glacial water trapped within the bowl. As the complex frequencies travel through the bronze and transfer into the liquid, the flawlessly still surface suddenly erupts into a mesmerizing geometric dance. Complex, perfectly symmetrical mandala of standing waves instantly forms thousands of tiny intersecting ripples that organize themselves into a flawless hexagonal grid of vibrating energy. As the resonance peaks, the energy becomes so intense that microscopic droplets of water actually levitate, leaping joyfully from the surface in a misty, dancing fountain, suspended by the sheer power of the acoustic vibration. The artisan stands motionless, bathed in the healing frequencies, watching the water dance, entirely surrendered to the hypnotic, slowly decaying, endlessly soothing song. As the grand, soaring initial note of the newly birthed singing bowl begins its long, inevitable journey towards silence, the concept of time within the sanctuary seems to fundamentally alter its pace. In the frantic, rushing world beyond the snow-capped Himalayan peaks, time is a sharp, relentless blade, endlessly slicing the day into hurried minutes and anxious, fleeting seconds. But here, within the heavy, protective embrace of the stone walls, time behaves more like a vast, slow-moving glacier, inching forward with a profound, unhurried, and majestic grace. The acoustic decay of the bronze vessel is a perfect physical manifestation of this altered reality. The sound does not simply cease abruptly, it embarks on a beautiful, lingering, and incredibly elegant retreat. The highest, brightest harmonic frequencies are the very first to gently evaporate, dissolving smoothly into the heavy, fragrant air like morning mist burning off a high alpine lake. As these brighter notes softly fade, the deeper foundational hum is beautifully laid bare, revealing a thick, resonant drone that seems entirely detached from the physical bowl itself. It becomes a free-floating entity, a phantom vibration that hums within the hollow, vaulted spaces of the architecture. The mesmerizing, levitating water droplets, which had danced so joyfully above the surface of the glacial pool, slowly begin to lose their acoustic support. One by one, with microscopic splashing sighs, they fall back down into the geometric mandala of standing waves. Even the water itself begins to calm, the sharp hexagonal grid of ripples slowly rounding out, becoming softer, less defined, until they stretch into long, lazy, undulating swells. Eventually, even these heavy swells surrender to gravity and the decaying acoustic energy, returning the water to its original state of flawless, glass-like stillness. Yet, even when the human ear can no longer detect a discernible musical note, the heavy bronze continues to silently, powerfully vibrate. If you were to bring your fingertips within a fraction of an inch of the polished metal, you would feel a distinct tingling warmth, a phantom pulse proving that the bowl is still actively breathing, still singing a song meant only for the deepest, most quiet fibers of the physical body. This incredibly slow, graceful decay of sound naturally invites the wandering mind to settle deeply into a state of profound philosophical reflection upon the very nature of legacy and the beautiful, invisible weight of the past. As the ambient vibration finally fades into absolute heavy stillness, the eye is organically drawn to the microscopic world illuminated by the single wavering beeswax candle resting upon the pine workbench. Caught within this soft, buttery halo of light is a swirling, slow-motion galaxy of suspended dust motes. These are not the meaningless grey particles of a neglected, empty room. They are the microscopic, floating archives of the forge's vast, centuries-old history. If you were to zoom in with impossible focused clarity upon a single drifting speck, you might find a microscopic curved shaving of aged Himalayan cedar lifted into the air months ago from the artisan's meticulous polishing of a wooden mallet. Another tiny mote, catching the candlelight with a sudden, brilliant golden flash, is a microscopic flake of raw, unoxidized copper, perpetually suspended in the warm thermal currents generated by the distant slumbering hearth. These tiny floating fragments silently map the invisible architecture of the room, swirling gently in the wake of the sound waves that just passed through them. They dance in an endlessly complex, chaotic, yet perfectly peaceful ballet, completely unburdened by the crushing earthly weight of gravity. Watching them drift is profoundly mesmerizing, a visual lullaby that gently untethers the heavy mind from the lingering anxieties of the future and the deeply buried regrets of the past, anchoring your awareness entirely within the beautiful microscopic perfection of the present. Passing second, they represent the slow, continuous, beautiful erosion of the world, a gentle, comforting reminder that all things, even the heavy iron anvils and the massive, unyielding stone walls, are in a constant, invisible state of becoming and dissolving, moving at a pace so incredibly slow that it appears to the fleeting human eye as perfect, eternal stillness. Lowering your gaze from the floating golden galaxy of historical dust, you look gently toward the hard-packed earthen floor and the massive, irregular blocks of granite that form the foundational base of the sanctuary walls. Here, the concept of time stretches even further, expanding far beyond the narrow scope of human generations into the vast, entirely incomprehensible realm of geological patience. Near the base of the western wall, illuminated only by the faint, rosy, ambient glow of the banked charcoal, a single ancient block of grey granite bears a microscopic meandering fissure. This tiny crack, no wider than a single fine strand of heavy yak hair, is a breathtaking masterpiece of slow, immense natural force. It was not created by a sudden, violent blow from a heavy iron grounding hammer, but by the relentless, microscopic shifting of the entire Himalayan mountain range over thousands of quiet years. The great mountain breathes, expanding slightly in the short, intense heat of the high-altitude summer and contracting with bone-crushing, silent force during the deep, freezing plunge of the long, dark winter. This slow thermal respiration, acting continuously upon the unimaginably heavy mass of the stone, created the delicate fissure millimeter by millimeter over a span of time that renders a single human life to nothing more than a brief, passing, inconsequential shadow. Running a deeply calloused fingertip gently along this tiny, winding crack in the cold stone is a profoundly humbling and deeply relaxing experience. It connects the active mind instantly to the vast, ancient, unhurried history of the earth itself, putting into beautiful, soft perspective the fleeting, temporary nature of our own daily struggles. The mountain stone does not rush. It does not harbour anxiety about the impending icy dawn or the inevitable changing of the harsh seasons. It simply exists, unconditionally absorbing the slow, heavy passage of epochs with absolute, unyielding stoicism. In the immediate, silent presence of such profound geological patience, the human heart cannot help but naturally slow its frantic beating, matching its own internal rhythm to the deep, silent, slow-moving, tectonic pulse of the sleeping world below. This profound, graceful surrender to the slow, relentless flow of time is perhaps the greatest and most beautiful secret securely held by the master artisans of this secluded valley. As the current master stands quietly before his finished, gleaming masterpiece, breathing in the deeply perfumed, heavy air of the forge, he feels absolutely no lingering desire to carve his own name into the flawless, shining bronze. There will be no hallmark, no identifying signature, no vain, desperate attempt to tether his personal, fleeting ego to the enduring physical object he has spent days meticulously coaxing into existence. In the modern world, the desperate pursuit of personal legacy and individual recognition is a heavy, exhausting burden, a constant, anxious clamour to be remembered and validated. But here, in the dim, smoky, incredibly peaceful twilight of 1710, true ultimate mastery is entirely anonymous. The artisan deeply and comfortably understands that he is merely a temporary conduit, a fleeting momentary arrangement of flesh and bone entrusted for a few short, beautiful decades with the ancient sacred knowledge of fire, sound and metal. His true, enduring legacy is entirely invisible and completely weightless. It is the pure, sustained, healing sound that will eventually echo through the vast, hollow stone halls of a distant cliffside monastery, long after his own calloused hands have quietly returned to the earth, long after his spoken name has completely faded from the memory of his distant descendants, the heavy bronze vessel will continue to perfectly sing. It will outlive him by centuries, providing a deep, grounding, acoustic anchor for thousands of other weary, seeking souls who will never ever know the face of the man who lovingly struck the very first note. There is an immense, profound, and deeply relaxing freedom in this absolute willing surrender of the self. By completely letting go of the desperate, heavy need to be personally remembered, the artisan effortlessly achieves a state of perfect, enduring peace, allowing his own quiet energy to dissolve seamlessly into the great, continuous, unbroken, softly flowing river of history. It is a quiet, noble, and endlessly comforting thought, a heavy, philosophical balm that gently smooths the lingering wrinkles from the tired mind and perfectly prepares the willing spirit for the deep, dreamless, and absolute oblivion of the impending night. The deep, resonant frequencies have finally fully integrated into the vast, velvety silence of the high hall, leaving behind only the exquisite visual memory of their passing. The master artisan remains standing in the absolute stillness of his elevated wooden platform, his eyes resting gently upon the surface of the glacial water cradled within the gleaming, heavy bronze vessel. The water has completely shed its geometric mandala of ripples, returning to a state of such flawless, absolute, and pristine flatness that it ceases to look like a liquid at all. It has transformed into a perfect, dark, obsidian mirror, an impeccable liquid lens that captures the immediate world and flips it upside down within its curving boundaries. Looking down into this miniature liquid cosmos, the artisan sees the inverted reflection of the heavy cedar beams of the ceiling, appearing like massive dark ribs guarding a profound and secretive womb. The velvety carbon-black coating of soot that blankets the upper rafter timbers is reproduced in the water's depths as an unfathomable, starless abyss, a beautiful and comforting void that seems to stretch downward for miles into the very heart of the mountain bedrock. Caught within this dark, reflected sky is the tiny, perfectly sharp orange teardrop of the single beeswax candle flame, shimmering softly like a solitary warming star stranded in a sea of liquid night. The absolute immobility of the water is intensely hypnotic. A visual anchor of the highest order, it demands nothing from the eyes, offers no frantic movement to distract the mind, and effortlessly pulls the attention deep into a state of heavy, contemplative quiet. It is a perfect physical manifestation of internal clarity, a mind completely unruffled by the passing winds of the outer world, holding the light of its surroundings in a state of pure, unblemished, and restful balance. As the artisan leans slightly closer to the resting vessel, his own reflection slowly manifests within the dark mirror of the glacial water. The image is softened, gently curved by the subtle organic geometry of the bowl's hand-hammered walls. In the dim golden light, the lines of his face, the deep weathered furrows around his eyes, the heavy calm set of his jaw, the silver-streaked strands of his hair falling loosely around his brow, appear not as signs of aging, but as natural, beautiful textures, indistinguishable from the grain of the polished walnut workbench or the microscopic fissures in the granite walls. He looks into his own reflected eyes, and for a long, unbroken moment, there is a profound, silent communication between the man of flesh and the image in the bronze. But as he continues to gaze into the liquid depth, the subtle optical properties of the hand-beaten silver lining begin to work a quiet magic. The polished silver beneath the water doesn't merely reflect the surface, it introduces a deep, glowing, pearlescent luminosity that seems to emanate from the very center of the alloy itself. This internal light catches the microscopic, indelible flakes of copper and tin suspended in the water, transforming his reflection into a ghostly, shimmering silhouette of pure golden amber energy. It is as if the bowl is revealing the true energetic blueprint of its creator, the phantom of the master permanently locked within the crystalline structure of the bronze. Every focused breath he took while shaping the metal, every rhythmic strike of his heavy iron mallet, every subtle intention of harmony he held within his chest throughout the long afternoon has been permanently recorded, materialized, and preserved within this beautiful heavy object. He is no longer looking merely at an external tool, he is looking into a mirror of his own soul's dedication, a material repository of a lifetime spent in perfect alignment with the laws of resonance and peace. The awareness of this profound connection coaxes a long, incredibly slow and deeply satisfied sigh from the master's chest. The warm breath travels downward, brushing across the surface of the obsidian pool with a touch as light as a passing thought. The impact is microscopic, yet instantly the perfect mirror is beautifully shattered. Series of tiny concentric circular rings ripple outward from the center of the pool, expanding gracefully until they touch the polished bronze rim, and softly ricochet back inward, creating a delicate shifting lattice of liquid shadows. The clear inverted geometry of the ceiling beams and the sharp teardrop of the candle flame instantly dissolve, warping into long, lazy, undulating ribbons of amber and black that dance in a slow-motion waltz across the water's surface. This gentle disruption is wonderfully relaxing to behold. It is a visual reminder of the fluid, ever-changing nature of reality, a reminder that nothing is static, that all things must move, shift, and flow, transitioning seamlessly from clarity to chaos and back to clarity again. The artisan watches with heavy, half-closed eyelids as the ripples slowly, methodically exhaust their momentum. The long ribbons of light gradually shorten, their undulations flattening out, returning to the edges of the bronze walls until, with a final, lazy shimmer, the water surrenders completely to the reigning gravity. The mirror effortlessly re-establishes itself, the starless sky returns to the depths, and the tiny orange star of the candle flame locks back into its perfect motionless position. The absolute stillness that follows this brief movement feels even deeper, heavier, and more profound than before, wrapping the workbench and the man in a cocoon of unshakable, absolute tranquility. Allowing his gaze to lift from the reformed liquid mirror, the artisan lets his attention wander across the surface of the hand-hammered rim itself, where the metal meets the air. Here, in the soft, raking light of the candle, he can observe the magnificent, microscopic landscape created by the final, delicate passes of his polishing stones. The bronze is a canvas of thousands of tiny, overlapping facets, microscopic, shallow concavities left behind by the rounded river pebbles used to smooth away the rough edges of the forge. Each individual facet catches the candlelight at a fractionally different angle, creating a shimmering, textured ring of light that encircles the water like a halo of liquid gold. It is a visual testament to the immense, unhurried patience that defines this craft. There are no straight lines here, no machine-made perfections, no cold, sterile uniformities. Every millimeter of the surface bears the organic, asymmetrical signature of human hands working in harmony with natural materials. The subtle variations in the thickness of the rim, the tiny, dark motes of unoxidized carbon trapped beneath the protective coat of wild beeswax, the faint, iridescent purples and blues that whisper at the very edge of the polished bronze, they are all part of the bowl's unique personality, its irreplaceable acoustic fingerprint. Standing in the quiet warmth of the room surrounded by the heavy scents of apricot oil, frankincense resin, and ancient wood ash, you feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this level of human devotion. It is a world where beauty is not rushed into existence, where quality is measured in generations rather than profit, and where the ultimate goal of labor is simply to create a vessel capable of bringing a profound healing quiet to a chaotic world. Let this immense protective dedication wash over your tired thoughts, smoothing away the sharp edges of your day and allowing your mind to sink effortlessly into the deep, supportive, and completely unshakable peace that resides at the very heart of the master's craft. The inverted universe held within the dark mirror of the glacial water slowly releases its hypnotic grip on the master artisan's gaze. He steps back a single, deliberate pace from the walnut workbench, allowing his hands to fall loosely to his sides, completely relaxed. The long, immersive journey of creation has reached its beautiful, natural conclusion. The singing bowl sits perfectly grounded upon its thick cushion of red and indigo yak wool, its mirrored surface gleaming softly in the dimming light, fully alive with the latent resonance of 1,000 masterful strikes. It is time now to prepare the physical sanctuary for its own long, well-deserved night of sleep. The artisan moves with a slow, almost fluid grace across the raised wooden platform, descending the shallow steps to return to the hard-packed earthen floor of the main hall. Every movement is unhurried, executed with the rhythmic economy of a man who values the deep silence he has worked so hard to cultivate. He walks first toward the small stone stove where the evening tea was brewed. The rhododendron and juniper branches have completely surrendered to the fire, turning into a delicate, fragile topography of pale orange and white ash. He lifts a small, heavy iron shovel from a hook on the stone wall and carefully scatters a thin, powdery blanket of cool wood ash over the remaining embers. The bright, dancing orange light instantly vanishes, smothered beneath the grey insulation, leaving only a faint structural heat that will keep this cozy corner comfortably warm until the dawn. He turns and walks toward the grand smelting hearth, the monolithic stone circle that stands as the absolute center of gravity for the entire workshop. The bed of coals deep within the central crater continues to pulse with a deep subterranean cherry-red glow, a steady breathing light that has not changed since he first entered the room. This fire is never extinguished, it is merely guided into a state of deep restorative hibernation. The artisan lifts a large, flat slab of porous grey slate, a heavy stone cover specifically cut to match the diameter of the hearth's central opening. Holding the heavy slab with both hands, his calloused palms finding a firm grip on the rough edges, he slowly, carefully lowers it over the glowing crater. The sound of stone meeting clay is a low, heavy, completely deadened thud that sends a subtle grounding vibration through the soles of his feet. As the slate cover settles into place, it cuts off the direct oxygen supply, forcing the fiery coals to slow their metabolism down to a bare minimum. The localized amber halo that had painted the surrounding anvils and tools in warm shades of rose and gold gently retracts, dissolving into the encroaching shadows. The great forge is now securely blanketed for the night, its immense thermal energy locked deep within the thick river stones and the baked clay walls, where it will silently radiate a deep, comforting and protective warmth throughout the long, freezing Himalayan night. With the fires safely put to rest, the primary source of illumination shifts entirely to the high, rectangular windows of oiled lacquer paper. True midnight has now claimed the mountain valley outside, and the moonlight has grown incredibly intense, casting long, sharp, silver geometric patterns across the dark plaster of the eastern wall. This cool, ethereal light behaves like a slow liquid, slowly pouring into the cavernous space to blend seamlessly with the remaining pools of warm shadow. The artisan walks toward his scribe's desk, where the solitary beeswax candle is nearing the very end of its long service. The flame has shrunk to a tiny, perfect golden teardrop that sits directly atop a swirling, translucent pool of melted wax within the tattered brass holder. Instead of blowing the flame out, which would create a sharp, forced sound and a bitter plume of smoke, the artisan utilizes a small, specialized brass snuffer shaped like a miniature cone. He slowly lowers the cone over the tiny flame, cutting off its breath with absolute gentleness. The light softly vanishes, leaving behind a thin, sweet, spinning ribbon of pure white smoke that rises gracefully toward the ceiling rafters, filling the alcove with the comforting, nostalgic scent of warm honey and clean wax. The darkness that fills the room now is not terrifying or empty. It is a rich, velvet, soft, and deeply protective twilight, a heavy blanket of shade that irons out the details of the room and invites the active mind to fully surrender its vigilance. The artisan stands motionless in the center of the vast, quiet room, allowing his awareness to expand and completely fill the dark architectural space. The olfactory tapestry of the forge is now at its peak of complexity and soothing power. In the heavy stillness, the distinct scents of the day's labor have perfectly blended into a single, deeply sedating perfume. There is the grounding mineral tang of the cooling bronze, the sweet, heavy incense of the frankincense resin from the chamber of patina, the spicy, nutty warmth of the infused apricot oil from the mallet chest, and the faint, comforting aroma of roasted buckwheat hulls rising from the bowl's cushion. This rich, complex air coats his lungs with every slow inhalation, acts directly upon his nervous system, and signals to every cell in his physical body that the time for productivity has completely passed. and the time for absolute rest has arrived. The room feels incredibly safe, a reinforced stone fortress designed specifically to repel the chaotic, hostile elements of the outer world. The colossal cedar beams of the ceiling, the thick stone walls, the heavy iron tools hanging silently on their pegs, they are all resting in a state of absolute unshakable permanence, holding the space open for him, protecting him from the passage of time. He lets his head drop forward slightly, his eyelids growing impossibly heavy, completely saturated with the peaceful twilight of the room. He takes one final, long, deep breath of the fragrant air, releases it in a silent stream of gratitude, and prepares to leave the tools of his craft behind, stepping fully into the welcoming, beautiful embrace of the gathering silence. The master artisan makes his final, slow transit across the dark expanse of the main forge, his felted wool slippers brushing against the leathery, rammed earth floor with a sound like a gentle autumn wind passing through dry meadow grass. He reaches the heavy velvet curtain of woven yak hair that separates the main hall from the outer world. As his calloused hand grasps the dense fabric, the coarse, reassuring texture grounds him one last time in the material reality of the sanctuary. He pulls the curtain aside with a slow, sweeping motion, slipping through the opening and letting the heavy burgundy expanse fall back into place behind him with a soft, air-cushioned thud. The transition is complete. He now stands in the small anteroom where the air is slightly cooler but completely still, completely insulated from the mountain draught. On a low stone shelf, the solitary butter lamp continues to burn, its tiny teardrop flame floating atop a pool of clarified yak butter, casting a faint golden aura that illuminates the heavy wooden cloaks hanging from their pegs. The artisan lifts his own thick woven cloak of undyed sheep's wool, sliding his arms into the heavy sleeves. The fabric is dense and comforting, smelling faintly of high pastures, dry mountain air, and the clean wood smoke of the evening stove. It wraps around his broad shoulders like a heavy protective blanket, anchoring his body in a state of absolute, unshakable warmth. He steps over the raised wooden threshold, leaving the interior sanctuary of the forge behind, and enters his private sleeping quarters located in a small adjacent stone structure connected by a short, covered walkway. This room is a marvel of minimalist comfort, designed for nothing else but the absolute surrender of the self to deep, restorative slumber. The walls are built from the same thick granite blocks as the main workshop, coated inside with a smooth, pale clay plaster that has absorbed the radiant warmth of the afternoon sun. The floor is covered in thick, layered rugs woven from the softest wool of native mountain sheep, their deep pile yielding luxuriously beneath his feet. In the center of the room sits the sleeping platform, a low, sturdy frame crafted from thick planks of aged Himalayan cedar that emit a faint, clean, resinous perfume into the air. Atop this wooden foundation rests a massive mattress packed densely with pure, unspun wild cotton and fine, dried alpine grasses that have been dried in the sterilizing sunlight of the highest peaks. The bedding is an inviting mountain of heavy hand-woven woolen quilts dyed in soothing shades of deep indigo and soft slate grey, looking exactly like a nest built from the very fabric of the midnight sky. The artisan sits down on the edge of the low sleeping platform, a movement that causes the cedar planks to emit a single, low, dry wooden creak that settles instantly into the quiet of the room. He removes his soft felt slippers, letting his bare feet sink momentarily into the plush, warm wool of the floor rugs. The physical fatigue of the day's intense, percussive labor is now fully catching up to him, manifesting not as pain but as a heavy, luxurious weight that pulls at his limbs and gently darkens the edges of his consciousness. His shoulders drop completely. The muscles of his back, which spent hours rhythmically swinging the heavy iron mallets, relax entirely, surrendering their tension to the supportive framework of his body. He leans back, swinging his legs onto the mattress, and pulls the heavy indigo quilts up over his chest, tucking the coarse wool tightly beneath his chin. The weight of the quilts is immense and profoundly comforting, applying a gentle, uniform pressure across his entire body that feels like a continuous, reassuring embrace. He is perfectly warm, perfectly secure, completely insulated within a fortress of stone, wood, and wool. As he rests his head upon a firm pillow filled with dried lavender blossoms and smooth, unhusked millet grains, he closes his eyes, letting his gaze turn fully inward. The visual world of the forge, the glowing red hearth, the mirrored bronze bowls, the geometric mandalas of vibrating water slowly dissolves into a vast, featureless expanse of soft indigo mist. The only sound that remains is the deep, slow, and perfectly rhythmic cadence of his own breathing. Inhale, a long, smooth drawing in of the clean cedar-scented air. Exhale, a slow, effortless release of all thought, all memory, all expectation. The boundary between his physical body and the surrounding room begins to beautifully blur. He no longer feels like an individual man lying on a wooden bed. He feels like a natural extension of the mountain itself, a quiet element of the landscape resting in perfect harmony with the turning of the earth. The relentless Himalayan wind outside continues its low, distant, bass-heavy hum against the stone walls, but to the sleeping artisan, that sound is nothing more than a profound cosmic lullaby, a gentle assurance that the world is being watched over and that he is entirely free to let go. His mind grows wonderfully quiet, his thoughts unraveling like loose threads of wool in a gentle breeze, as he drifts closer and closer to the border of a deep, dreamless, and absolute slumber. The heavy indigo quilts hold the artisan's body in an unshakable, warming embrace, while his consciousness drifts effortlessly into the liminal space that separates waking from deep slumber. In this quiet twilight of the mind, the frantic thoughts of the daylight hours have completely dissolved, leaving behind a vast, dark expanse of serene stillness. Yet deep within this mental quiet, a beautiful phantom sensation begins to gently manifest. It is the sensory memory of the singing bowl's voice, a slow, rhythmic, and incredibly low-frequency vibration that continues to patiently echo through the very marrow of his bones. This internal sound does not possess a sharp, distinct note. It has transformed into a soft, continuous, and boundless hum, a soothing auditory tide that rises and falls in perfect, flawless synchronization with the steady expansion and contraction of his chest. With every slow, measured breath he draws in, the gentle vibration seems to swell, wrapping his weary mind in a comforting cloak of absolute safety. With every long, effortless exhalation, the sound recedes, carrying away the very last microscopic remnants of tension, leaving his spirit feeling remarkably light, weightless, and entirely at peace. He is no longer an active participant in the material world. He has become a passive vessel, completely surrendered to the healing, timeless frequencies of the bronze he so lovingly coaxed into existence. As the internal echo continues its slow, hypnotic waltz, the visual memory of the workshop's details undergoes a beautiful, dreamlike simplification. In the soft darkness behind his closed eyelids, the heavy stone walls, the massive iron anvils, and the long rows of hanging hammers slowly lose their sharp, rigid outlines. They begin to soften, melt, and flow together, blending seamlessly into a single cohesive landscape of deep, velvety shadows and cool, pearlescent moonlight. The only distinct image that remains floating in this peaceful mental void is the memory of the polished bronze rim and the glass-like mirror of the glacial water it cradles. He watches with heavy internal eyes as this dark obsidian pool remains absolutely motionless, completely devoid of any ripples, holding the tiny reflected star of the candle flame in a state of eternal, unblinking balance. This image becomes a profound visual anchor for his drifting mind, a literal map of absolute tranquility. The external world, the freezing mountain gales scouring the jagged peaks, the immense weight of the surrounding glaciers, the rapid, unceasing passage of human centuries, feels completely remote, like a faint, meaningless whisper passing through a distant valley. Within this sacred internal sanctuary, there is absolutely nothing left to achieve, nothing left to forge, and nowhere else to journey. There is only the supreme, unconditional comfort of the present moment, a beautiful sea of stillness that invites him to sink deeper and deeper into its supportive depths. The rhythm of his breathing slows even further, matching the slow, deep, and majestic respiration of the sleeping mountains below. Inhale, the soft indigo mist expands, filling his awareness with a profound sense of warmth and protection. Exhale, the mind slips further down, letting go of the self, dissolving into the gathering shadows. The physical sensation of the cedar bed beneath his body seems to gently fade away, replaced by a wonderful, weightless feeling of suspension, as if he is floating safely within a vast, warm and nurturing womb of pure sound. The continuous, low-frequency hum of the distant wind against the thick granite walls serves as a permanent cosmic lullaby, a steady reassurance that he is perfectly protected from the cold expanse of the outer night. The air in his sleeping quarters remains pleasantly cool against his face, carrying the faint, soothing perfumes of dried lavender blossoms, fresh mountain cotton, and the clean, sweet resin of the cedar wood, creating a sensory environment of unmatched, suffocating peace. Every element of his surroundings, both physical and mental, is working in perfect, silent harmony to guide him toward the final threshold of consciousness. The lines upon his face have completely smoothed out. His hands, restfully curled upon the soft wool of the blankets, are entirely relaxed, their heavy labor fully honored and beautifully concluded. He drifts effortlessly at the very edge of absolute dreamless oblivion, a willing traveler ready to cross over into the sweetest, deepest, and most profound slumber imaginable. The border between awareness and sleep finally begins to completely, beautifully vanish. The gentle internal echo of the singing bowl's voice grows softer, thinner, and more distant, gradually retreating into the deepest, most secretive recesses of his mind. It is no longer a sound that can be separated from the silence. It has integrated fully into the very texture of the quiet, becoming a permanent, subliminal foundation of peace that requires no conscious attention to be felt. The inverted universe of the dark water mirror, the tiny orange star of the candle flame, the soft geometric lines of the oiled paper windows, they all gently and smoothly recede, fading away like a slow-motion sunset, dissolving into the deep indigo embrace of a starless night. The mind has fully relinquished its hold on the material world, unconditionally surrendering its vigilance to the protective, immense safety of the stone sanctuary. There are no more words, no more images, no more boundaries. There is only a vast, boundless, and completely unblemished void of pure, restorative rest, a beautiful oblivion that reaches out with soft, velvet-cloaked arms to fully and definitively claim his spirit. The slow, heavy rhythm of his breathing remains as the final, lingering anchor of his physical presence in the room, a gentle, automated heartbeat that marks the passage of a night completely detached from time. Inhale, a long, deep, and effortless drawing in of absolute tranquility. Exhale, final, perfect surrender to the dark, welcoming sea of sleep. The body is completely immobilized by a luxurious, leaden fatigue, a profound and hard-earned exhaustion that transforms the simple act of lying still into an experience of pure, unadulterated bliss. The heavy indigo quilts, the dense cotton mattress, the fragrant cedar planks, they hold him in a state of absolute, unyielding equilibrium, absorbing his weight entirely and grounding his energy deep into the ancient foundations of the mountain bedrock. Outside, the great Himalayan range continues its silent, tectonic slumber beneath the brilliant wheel of the early starlight, completely indifferent to the brief passing lives of men, yet holding this small forge and its sleeping master in a protective, eternal embrace. Inside the room, the silence is now absolute, thick, and suffocatingly peaceful, a perfect vacuum of noise that smothers all worry and irons out all care. The fires are cold ash, the ledger is closed, the bronze is sealed, the night is completely and beautifully won. Allow yourself to slip seamlessly across the final threshold along with him, letting your own tired thoughts dissolve completely into the vast, dark, and endlessly comforting river of history, as you sink down into the deepest, sweetest, and most profound slumber of your life. Sleep. Welcome to Sleepy History with Wesley, your personal sanctuary of ancient tales. Here, we blend authentic historical events with gentle AI technology to recreate immersive, soothing journeys through time. This channel is crafted specifically for relaxation and sleep support. TAND is not a substitute for professional medical advice. For your safety, please do not listen while driving or operating machinery. Now, close your eyes and let history carry you into a peaceful sleep.